Please welcome to the stage, host of Paul Murray Live Sky News, Paul Murray.
G'day everyone, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us here. It is a beautiful Darwin start to spring, and welcome to the 2025 Bush Summit here in the Northern Territory. Thanks to the good people of the NT News in conjunction with Sky News and of course the wonderful people of Hancock Prospecting. My name is Paul Murray. If you would prefer, you can think of me as the fat guy from The Hangover to help you through. For those of you that have seen the TV show once or twice, yes, it's true, shorter and fatter in real life. Now, this is the final of what has been quite a fun marathon around the country. It's made plenty of great news too, where, as you will have seen both on Sky News and in the mastheads around the country, this effort, which I think has been the best of the Bush Summits so far, with great promise for many years to come, has gone through Broome, Mount Gambier, Toowoomba, Wagga Wagga and Ballarat, all of which to shine a spotlight on regional Australia, its issues, but also, most importantly, its brilliance. I'm lucky enough in the day job to be able to do a show from regional Australia once a month, and the joy of doing those shows, and in conjunction, and in fact the idea of Paul Whitaker, our boss at Sky News, was to try to go to places when times were normal. Often national media will only roll in when it's bad news, or big news, which often can be bad news, or if you sling them enough money to do the weather. Instead, we decided to go and to try to show the stories of people as they were working and living and loving and having the most of a great Australian experience. That, of course, is not a perfect one because it's the human experience, but it is one that absolutely is worth celebrating, salivating and spreading the word about, and that in part is what the Bush Summit of course has done. To see so many luminaries in the room, put simply the people who are the can-do people of every place that we've been, as I said, from Broome to Darwin. Many people in this room should be proud of your own personal and professional achievements, but most importantly, the passion that you have for the people who live outside of those big cities, of which too much of our national conversation is about all day, every day. So thank you very much for everyone for being here today. Now, of course, I'd like to welcome Nicole Brown, who's the Deputy Chair of the Lakiara, I knew I'd get it wrong, Nation, to deliver the Welcome to Country. Nicole will be followed by Nikita Kearney, who joins us from the Australian Indigenous Education Foundation, with whom we have a long-standing and proud relationship for the acknowledgement of country.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. We're gathered here today on Larrakia country, a place that has always been the centre of meetings, movement and exchange. For thousands of years, people have come here to share knowledge, resolve challenges and build relationships for the benefit of all. It's in the same spirit of inclusion and purpose that we come together today for this Bush Summit. I am a proud Larrakia woman, and on behalf of my people, I acknowledge our elders past who've paved the way with courage, present who guide us with wisdom, and future generations who will inherit the legacies that we shape today. I also extend respect to all First Nations people here with us and to every community across this nation whose voices are essential to our shared future. When I speak of country, I'm not talking about the nation called Australia. I'm speaking about what Aboriginal people know of country, our lands, waters, skies and spirit, and the deep connections of kinship and responsibility that bind them together. Country is alive. It provides us with knowledge, it sustains us, and it guides how we live with one another. To care for country is to honour a responsibility that's physical, spiritual, cultural, and generational. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples are not just part of remote and regional Australia. We are central to its strength and its futures. We are the landowners managing vast estates. We are the cultural custodians protecting heritage. We are its business leaders, its educators, scientists, innovators, and storytellers. In the remote part of this nation where government and industry presence is limited, it is Aboriginal people who step up to lead, keep communities strong, maintain services, safeguard language and culture, and create opportunities for the next generation. Yet too often, Aboriginal voices are invited into conversations at the end rather than at the beginning. Too often, decisions are made without us. If we're serious about solving the challenges facing regional and rural Australia, whether in agriculture, energy, infrastructure, health or education, this must change. Aboriginal voices are not optional, they are critical. The evidence is clear. When Aboriginal people are genuinely included in conversations and decision-making, solutions are so much more effective, more sustainable, and deliver better outcomes for everyone. Doing better requires action. It means moving beyond acknowledgement into genuine partnership. It means valuing Indigenous knowledge alongside Western expertise and ensuring that Aboriginal leadership is not only recognised but resourced. Stop seeing First Nations people as stakeholders to be consulted and start recognising us as decision makers and partners that are shaping the future of this nation. I leave you with this. This land has taught us, all of us, across millennia, that collaboration, respect and inclusion creates legacies that endure. And as you all meet today, I encourage you to listen deeply to one another, to community and to country itself. If you do, the solutions that you shape here will not only address today's challenges, but will create a future that's inclusive, courageous and lasting. Welcome to Larrakia country.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nikita Kearney, and I'm a proud Gurindji woman from my mother's side, located 9 hours drive southwest near the WA border, famously known for the Wave Hill Walk-Off. And on my father's side, I'm a proud Wiradjuri woman from the Dubbo region in New South Wales. However, I was lucky to be born and raised on this beautiful Larrakia country. I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners on the land in which we meet today. I would also like to pay my respects to the Larrakia elders past and present, and I extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today. May we walk together in a spirit of respect, collaboration and shared purpose. I've been invited to open this event by delivering the Acknowledgement of Country and sharing a bit about my story. Like many other young Aboriginal people growing up in the NT, I was exposed to environments that were often unsafe and unpredictable, and spent 4 years in the child protection system, which, as we know, causes significant disruption in all areas of a child's life and development, education being one of them. By year 9, I hated school and I was skipping school often to the point my attendance dropped down to 40%. Thankfully, my mother and Nana stepped in and suggested I go to boarding school. I was terrified, but I knew deep down I wanted better for myself and I didn't want to repeat those traumatic cycles, which we so often see in families affected by the stolen generation. I applied and was awarded a scholarship through AIEF and completed years 10, 11 and 12 at St Catherine's School in the eastern suburbs of Sydney. However, I was so far behind academically and failed most of my classes, further impacting my self-esteem and confidence. At the end of year 12, I enrolled myself into a bridging course through the University of New South Wales because I knew my ATAR would never get me through. I passed the bridging course and decided I wanted to enrol into a Bachelor of Social Work and a Bachelor of Criminology and Criminal Justice. Not sure what possessed me to do that, but I actually did surprisingly well. I passed every single subject after failing my whole life, and in the last 2 years I received distinctions and high distinctions. Weird, I know. I graduated a few years ago now and have been working at Anglicare NT. I worked in a youth diversion program for about 3 years, supporting young people who are involved in the youth justice system. And in the last 3 months, I've just changed roles. I am now a case manager for young people who have left the child protection system and in helping these young people navigate the complexities of early adulthood and helping them build towards their independence. All of this wouldn't have been possible without AIF and the opportunity I was given, which I am forever grateful for. Before I finish, I would just like to say that it is so important to bring our regional issues into the mainstream agenda because the voices, challenges and strengths of our mob in remote and regional communities are often overlooked. I've seen firsthand how the lack of access to education, healthcare, housing and support services can have lifelong impacts, which are even more complex when factoring in intergenerational trauma. If we keep ignoring these regional issues, we keep failing the next generation. We need real investment, real action, and real partnerships with our communities. My dream is to continue working with young people and help create a system that actually supports them, especially those who have been through the child protection or youth justice systems. I want to advocate for real change, not just tick box programs. One day I'd love to be in a position where I can help shape policy or even lead an organisation that empowers First Nations youth, because young people are our future. And personally, I just want to keep growing, learning and staying grounded in my culture, because that's what keeps me strong. Thank you everyone, and I hope you all have an amazing day.
What a wonderful story, congratulations. Now, of course, the Northern Territory is special for many things. One, ties are optional. Two, for a few hours every single year, you get to blow stuff up by celebrating the independence of the territory. Never change that. On the behalf of the rest of the country, never change that, all right? Chief Minister, number one, you touch that, I'm coming for you, all right? And I'm very effective at yelling. It is a wonderful place to be, and of course the natural country is one that stands out across the world, and of course today we come from its capital, Darwin.
What is it about the Northern Territory which makes it so unique? Is it our natural beauty, with spectacular deserted coastlines, roaring waterfalls and deep, ancient forests? From the Red Centre's arid glow to the tropical top end's embrace, these contrasting environments thrive with unparalleled grace. Is it the abundance of high-quality food, from freshly caught barramundi and oysters, or carefully harvested mangoes and premium beef, to prized tropical fruits, vegetables, and revered beers and spirits? Perhaps it's the friendly people, the relaxed lifestyle, and endless opportunity that lures people to this place. But like anywhere, we have our challenges too. Population and economic constraints and crime rates that in turn cripple our police, justice and correction systems. Access to medical care and quality education, often taken for granted in southern cities, isn't easy outside bigger centres. Attracting and retaining workers is difficult when livability factors lure them interstate. There is extra pressure on basic infrastructure in hospitals, classrooms and on regional road networks. But people living in the Territory are resilient and resourceful. A diverse population thrives, from various backgrounds so wide, embracing a relaxed lifestyle where connections preside. Beyond Outback's charm, a vibrant economic heart proudly beats, powered by mining, energy and public sector feeds. With thriving tourism and growing agriculture's potent might, the NT offers strategic advantages, persisting ever bright. For leaders with vision, seeking strategic investment to explore, the Northern Territory's potential calls unyielding, opening its door. Its unique cultural depth and economic strength truly soar, promising unparalleled opportunities and ever more. So embrace this frontier where ancient and future combine, a strategic destination of enduring strength and design. The Northern Territory awaits for those ready to lead the way, unlocking prosperity's gate for a resilient, bolder day. Welcome to the NT News Bush Summit 2025, nationally presented by S. Kidman.
And the fireworks! I should tell you, of course, that this program today is being streamed, obviously, through the NT News' website and also on Sky News Extra. G'day to everyone who's watching us at home around the country and online at skynews.com.au. An event like the National Bush Summit is not possible without event partners, and we'd like to thank our national partners, S. Kidman & Co, Optus, Combank, Qantas and Woolworths. To our state partners, APA, the Minerals Council of Australia, the NT Government. We'll be hearing from some of our partners throughout the day and what the Bush Summit and regional communities are going to mean to them. Now here's the fun bit where the blow-in is going to, without doubt, mispronounce half of the people on this list. I would like to thank the dignitaries that are in the room, which of course is the Honourable Leah Finucane, the Chief Minister of the Northern Territory, the Leader of the Opposition, Selina Yubo, Luke Gosling, who is the Federal Member for Solomon, Senator Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price, who is the Shadow Minister for Defence Industry, the Honourable Bill Young, who is the Treasurer and the Minister for Infrastructure. I like this business card because it's nice and long. They being the Honourable Robin Carl, who was the Minister for Trade, Business, Asian Relations, International Education, Migration and Population, Workforce Development, Advanced Manufacturing, Children and Families, Child Protection and Prevention of Domestic Violence. You're busy, Robin. To be challenged by the Honourable Steve Eddington. His business card is the Minister for Health, the Minister for Mental Health, Alcohol Policy, Aboriginal Affairs, Housing, Local Government and Community Development and Essential Services. Oh, we're not done. The Honourable Jinson Charles. This is impressive too. CLP Member for Sanderson, the Minister for People, Sport, Culture, the Minister for Disability, the Minister for Arts, the Minister for Youth, Seniors and Equity, the Minister for Multicultural Affairs and the Minister for Veterans. That's the joy of the Territory. There's not just one job. You do 100 at once. Some you get paid for, some you get a business card, most you get a kick in the backside. But fair enough, we work hard here. Well, I'm enjoying myself, you work hard here. Athena Pascoe-Bell is the Mayor of Palmerston. Koda Patel and Laurie Zion are both members of the Territory Parliament. Now we have a full program today and I'd like you to look ahead at any point to see what might be coming next. You can do that by scanning the QR code on your lanyard. Now, before we get into the conversation with the Chief Minister and the editor of the NT News, I want to show you some of the other voices that have been part of the conversation at the Bush Summit nationwide.
Mostly like home, staying around, it's parents, it's brothers and sisters. If one can't move, the rest of them can't. And they just, it's a lot of them getting into drugs and all that. It's not good. And they think in their mind, they think that they're not gonna fit in pretty good. But I've been down that track before, and if I can make a difference, surely the rest of them can.
The biggest one across the whole city and across all regional cities in New South Wales and the country is housing, having enough numbers of housing and development of housing and pipeline of housing.
I think the biggest issue for us here in Coonabarabran is the isolation of our community. Because we're in central west New South Wales, we don't have a lot of services in our community. I think we need more services for our youth.
We have many issues that are desperate in our community, but I'd say the biggest single issue is doctors, proper medical care. We have a pretty good hospital, but we need doctors full-time and it's near impossible to attain them.
Yeah, I guess the biggest issue for us is the lack of infrastructure in the Toowoomba region. We're talking roads. Toowoomba's had a big growth the last sort of 10 years, and recently, probably in the last 5 years, it's really exploded. With the Olympics coming forward, roads, schools, and sporting infrastructure is getting quite critical for us.
Main concern in our community is education, the opportunities our kids have got to get educated locally. More and more people are having to send their kids further and further away, which is a real detriment to the community because people are having to leave and we can't attract more people to the area.
I think the biggest issue that we've got in this area, in the Wimmera, is a lack of support from the government, especially on the volunteer emergency service levy and other infrastructure failings. Our road network here, our Western Highway, is an absolute mess. Amount of fatalities have been on that in the last few weeks. Even our local roads are falling apart. Our health system's falling apart. And just in general, unless you're in Melbourne, you don't seem to be getting any of the money that's around. So it's very disappointing and it seems to be getting worse.
One of the biggest things I see these days in our communities is a lack of volunteers for volunteer organisations. I'm a part of CFA and we find it very hard to get new and upcoming members. After a big fire like the recent Grampians fire, there'll be a small influx of people putting their hand up, but they just put their hand up and then fade off into the background. We need young members coming up, people putting their hand up for the long haul so that when we do get big fires like the Grampians fires, there's the people in the background there to do it.
So connectivity, or the lack of at the moment, we're 2025 and yet we can't get service 5Ks out of a town since they've shut down 3G. It's been the worst it's been forever. and it's not doing us any favours as farmers or people travelling through the rural areas.
The biggest issues that we are fighting for at the moment is farm gate access for higher productivity vehicles, having councils get access for funding to keep the roads up to standards for higher productivity trucks to get to the farm gate.
All right, let's rip in now. Melanie Plain is the editor of the NT News. Her passion for regional Australia is infectious. Her knowledge of the territory is second to none. She leads a fantastic team who not just inform but entertain and today educate about the issues that matter most here at the Bush Summit. And then we'll get a chat with the Chief Minister. Thank you so much, Melanie.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the inaugural Northern Territory Bush Summit. At the Northern Territory News, we tell the stories about us and what makes this place so special. For more than 70 years, we've been informing, inspiring and advocating for local, national and global matters that are important to all Territorians, and are proud to add News Corp Australia's premier national forum, the Bush Summit series, to our growing list of advocacy programs. The NT News Bush Summit shines a light on the challenges and immense opportunities rural and regional Australians face. It allows the nation's most powerful decision makers to listen to local communities, as well as discuss and devise practical solutions to ensure and develop ongoing prosperity in regional Australia. I recently received a letter to the editor in the Post. Yes, readers do still write in regular via snail mail. And enclosed was a handbook from the 1970s titled "This is Darwin." The sender, who was based in the UK, had received the booklet while they were working in Darwin back in 1970 and recently rediscovered it. It provided a remarkable insight into the territory and the path it was on more than 50 years ago. Darwin was heralded in the book as the fastest growing capital in the Commonwealth and one of the fastest in the world. It had a population of 25,000 people, which had grown from just 10,000 in the space of 5 years, and was projected to reach 50,000 by 1975, representing an annual compounding increase of more than 11%. It listed the territory's primary industries as beef, mining, oil and gas, fishing and forestry, and spoke of various projects many in the room will be familiar with decades later. Abattoirs in Darwin and Katherine so busy they were expanding. Bauxite mining beginning in Gove and iron ore in Francis Creek and Mount Bundy. Lead and zinc projects at MacArthur River and gold and copper at Warrego. It noted the substantial quantities of natural gas and oil located at Mereenie near Alice Springs, and how in the fishing industry, massive Japanese companies were considering setting up works in Darwin involving fish factories with processing and freezing facilities. Our growing port, then with an average of nearly 5 ships berthing a week, got a mention, and in the ag sector, all eyes were on Tipperary Station, which at the time was attempting the biggest ag project ever seen in Australia, with plans to produce 300,000 tonnes of grain sorghum a year. At the time, the NT also had 161 factories, most of them in Darwin, producing everything from pottery to our beloved Paul's Milk products. Speaking of the future, the book described the territory as one of the greatest agricultural centres in the Southern Hemisphere, with some of the most valuable country in the world, and how Darwin was a city on the threshold of development, bursting at the seams of people, buildings, excitement, a place of opportunity, interest and profit. A lot has changed in the more than 50 years since that book was published, but it seems just as much has remained the same. The territory continues to be known as the land of opportunity, and our reputation as being the last frontier, a place of larrikins and laid-back lifestyle, remains just as true today as in the decades past. We love and are known for our fearsome crocs, huge barra, natural wonders and, of course, our delicious laksa. But the territory has much more to offer than that. We are a land of potential and we are beyond ready to tap into it. If only we are given the chance to determine our own destiny. For too long, the territory has been held up by those who don't live here but think they know best. Perhaps they are simply afraid of what we might be able to achieve if only given the opportunity to do so. It's ironic that those that live in concrete jungles surrounded by cranes and construction want to dictate whether parts of the vastly untouched territory can or can't be developed. At the National Bush Summit dinner in Ballarat on Thursday night, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese made a comment about equal opportunities for all Australians, no matter where they lived. but it feels like the divide between the southern cities and northern regions is growing into a chasm. Perhaps not in how we connect as people, but in how services are delivered and how federal funds are spent. And the Territory is not immune. In fact, it feels like it's being left behind, sometimes faster than most. As billions in federal funds are directed towards taking away inconveniences for southern residents by improving their commutes with multi-lane roadways and highways and rail connectivity, let's pause to reflect on the fact that more than 70% of the Northern Territory's roads remain unsealed. Let's compare the inconvenience of a 5-minute delay in your commute to being cut off from essential services completely once the rain sets in. That's the reality many living in the Territory face. And we're not just speaking about remote communities. It was only last year that food supplies couldn't reach the wider Darwin region as a result of freight disruptions due to flooding on the Stuart Highway. And what other jurisdiction in this country can say it no longer has private maternity option in its capital city, let alone in the regions? How has the Tennant Creek Doppler weather radar, which is critical to the cattle and ag industry, as well as the safety of all residents, still not been delivered a decade on from when it was first promised? These are just a few examples of basic infrastructure and services that Territorians are being denied. The Territory is tired of walking in the shadows of those interstate. We're not a chess piece to be moved come election time, only to be quietly forgotten once a party gains power. Equal opportunity, regardless of which part of this great country you decide to call home, is what we demand. It is clear the Territory's legacy will not be built on the back of government promises, but on the determination and grit of our everyday people. It's etched into the calluses of every grazier's hands. It's in the sweat that stains the bands of their hats. It's in the sticky sap left behind from picking thousands of mangoes, or the salt that clings to the skin of our fishos. It's in the stain scrubbed of our doctors and nurses and tired eyes of our police officers, paramedics and fireys who run towards danger every day. It's in the patient words of our teachers who were determined to change the life of another through the power of education. It's in the perseverance of social and community workers attempting to beat the odds. It's in the red dirt-stained boots of the miner who just spent 12 hours underground, or in the blazing Territory sun running a pipeline. It's in the perseverance. It's in the back pain of our truck drivers who bounce through every bump of the Stuart Highway or the Barclay as they cart essential goods to supply to the masses. It's also in the resilience of our retail and hospitality workers who sweep up the broken glass after their umpteenth break-in for the year and put on a happy face for their customers, determined not to let it break them. When Territorians are told they can't, their natural instinct is to show the knockers that we can. The enduring industries that built the foundations of the Territory we know today will continue to shape our future. The NT holds the keys to economic prosperity for generations to come, not just for this place, but for the nation, and it's time to embrace that. The NT News is proud to continue its legacy of being a voice for Territorians, whether they live in the bush or in the city. We proudly back Territory businesses and the mums and dads and families who continue to shape the face of the Territory, doing their best to make this a wonderful place to live. We will continue to fight for a fair share for the Territory to ensure a prosperous future for all that call this place home, because at the NT News, we are for you. I would now like to introduce the Chief Minister of the Northern Territory, the Honourable Leah Finocchiaro, to the stage to present a keynote address. Following this address will be an in-conversation between the Chief Minister and Sky News Darwin Bureau Chief and Northern Australia correspondent, Matt Cunningham. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mel and Kirsten and the team at the NT News and Sky for putting on this Bush Summit here in Darwin. And we are very, very proud that this is the first time the Bush Summit has come to Darwin, the Northern Territory, and it's well and truly overdue. I'm joined by a long list of colleagues today, and Paul, you got some of them right, and some we'll do a bit of practice with you, all right? I know you're new around here. But I've got my whole cabinet, which I think says something about how important we believe this summit is and how much focus we want to put on the economic growth and social growth of Territorians. I'm also joined by backbench colleagues, and so I thank everyone for coming today. And again, to Mel and Kirsten, the entire team at the NT News, thank you very much for this important and first opportunity. I should also thank S. Kidman and their team. Thank you very much for the partnership and all of the sponsors. I think improving the lives of Australians and particularly Territorians is a fundamental component of our rebuilding the economy strategy. We came to government just 1 year ago, 1 year and 1 week, and we had 3 key things we were going to do. And we told Territorians we would reduce crime, and we saw earlier how important that is to our community. We told Territorians we would rebuild the economy after a decade of it going backwards and just not being where it needed to be. And we told Territorians we'd restore our beautiful lifestyle. And I think anyone watching live around the country from home is probably cold and dreary and miserable, and you saw just some of the iconic spaces that we live and play in every single day. I mean, it's not many people around this country who can swim in timeless waterfalls just for something to do with the kids on the weekend. But that's what we have here in the Northern Territory. And it's a 1.4 million square kilometre piece of the most beautiful part of this country with an untapped resource. And if that critical opportunity is left unrealised in situ, it will continue to be unproductive. And that's not what we want. That doesn't help anyone. But there is no doubt in my mind, in my team's mind, or in our government that we know that the success of this country rests on the success of the Northern Territory, and that we must be turning those glossy brochures into action. And now is the time, more than ever before, to deliver on that potential for Australia, for Territorians, for our region and for our allied partners. We know that our mission is to improve the lives of Territorians and create a better territory. That much is clear. And we've set a really strong pace and a clear course on what we're going to do and how we're going about to achieving that mission. And what success looks like for us and for all Territorians is for this place to be a highly competitive place to live, work, visit and invest. And so as we commenced our journey this year, we marked it our year of action, certainty and security, and we have been delivering on that commitment. On crime, we've acted decisively. We have the country's strongest bail laws, expanded police wanding powers, and we've got more police out on our streets. We know, as I said earlier, that the safety of our community is paramount. You can't have a thriving economy if your streets aren't safe. And we've already had some really clear results with the work we've been doing to reduce crime. The number of victims has fallen by 605. Now, if you're listening in a big state, that will seem like a tiny amount. But when you have a population of just over 250,000 people, it represents a 4.7% drop in the number of victims here in the Northern Territory. And we're very, very proud of that. We know there's much more work to do, and we've absolutely shown we've got the guts to do what it takes to put the safety of people above the rights of offenders. And when it comes to a strong economy, we know that Territorians have what it takes. A healthy economy underpins everything. It's what will deliver choice, it's what will deliver better health services, better roads, goods and services. In March, we launched our Rebuilding the Economy strategy, and it's a clear plan that we have built around 5 key areas. We said we'd make the Territory the best place to do business. We would build a bigger and a better workforce. We would deliver for Australia, and that is a key theme of this summit. We would unlock our region's growth, and we would connect the Territory. And that strategy is there to be transparent across government and across the private sector. And it ties in with this summit, as I said earlier. With respect to my federal colleagues and people around this beautiful country, I just think, as Mel very well articulated, that you are failing to understand the significance of the contribution that the Northern Territory can make to this country. Did you know that the Beetaloo Sub-Basin is Australia's largest onshore gas reserve and that the country's largest resource of uncontracted gas contains enough energy to power this entire nation for 200 years? Did you sitting at home know that? Did you also know that in comparison to many other Australian gas fields, including those offshore, our Beetaloo gas is actually very low in carbon dioxide at only 2 to 3%, making it one of the cleanest gas supplies in this country. Our energy is affordable, reliable, abundant and clean. And it's a national resource, not just for Territorians, but for Australians, our allies and our region. And while Victoria and New South Wales are progressing billion-dollar gas import terminals, which take expensive and emission-intensive gas from elsewhere in the world, we know that we can deliver that gas by Australians for Australians here from the Northern Territory. An Australian-first approach would invest in the development of our own resources, regulated by Australia, employing Australians, benefiting Australians, and powering Australians. Today marks a really significant step forward in our resource sector with the approval of 2 significant Beetaloo Sub-Basin investment milestones totalling $210 million. We will see commercial gas production from the Beetaloo in the first half of 2026, with beneficial use of gas agreements finalised to deliver Beetaloo's gas to market and royalties to Territorians, and we couldn't be more excited about it. It's 10 years overdue. And this is one of the examples that reflects our commitment to rebuilding the Territory's economy, and we've done a lot to get us there. And that's why we've centred our economic strategy around 5 key industries that Australians rely on, indeed depend on, and industries that require that national focus, industries that represent national security. The first is energy, and I've spoken about that. Overlay on top of that we have the best solar radiance in the country and the best gas, we have a huge opportunity for renewables. Australians should not be choosing the difference between putting food on the table or whether or not they turn the heater or the air conditioner on. And that is the situation this country is in, and it does not need to be there. But that is a situation that the Northern Territory can support and deliver on. We are the solution. Darwin is closer to Jakarta and Singapore than it is to Sydney or Melbourne. That's just a fact. And so food security is another key pillar in which we can deliver for Australia and for our region through agricultural investment and development. Whether it's fruits, nuts, vegetables, or our cattle industry, we have the opportunity for safe, secure agricultural businesses here in the Northern Territory operating at the very highest of standards. The significance of this is indisputable, and our strategic importance is also very clear when it comes to the defence of this nation. Our allies and our regional partners are looking to the Northern Territory just as much as our Australian Defence Forces are. War hit our shores when 680 bombs rained down on Darwin and Katherine in 1942. And what greater lesson do we as a country need to learn than the one that saw war come to Australian shores? Preparedness, posture and position is key to a secure future for all Australians, and that starts and ends with the enhancement of the ADF here, the support of our allies and our region through training and forward basing. The Northern Territory is a key allied partner of choice. We have unrivalled training ranges. We are a preferred destination when we come to host military exercises, and we've just had Talisman Sabre with 19 different countries exercising here in the Territory. As part of Talisman Sabre, the Australian Army conducted its first ever live firing of the Precision Strike missile at Mount Bundy training area. And we've got a strong commitment from the United States through our Marine Rotational Force here in the top end. And that will continue to grow along with our allied partners in Japan. There are 283 million people living within a 4-hour flight of Darwin. And with the defence security comes the need to have security of critical minerals, rare earths and metals, of which the Territory has in abundance. For those who want to see more renewables, remember this: it takes 20 different minerals to build a solar panel. Arafura Resources, Nolan's rare earth mine, which is 130 kilometres from Alice Springs, will be mining rare earths and minerals which are essential for defence and technology. It is groundbreaking for regional growth and, again, that Australian security of supply. Our 5th key focus is tourism, and that industry, by its very nature, protects and preserves what we love most about being Territorian. The waterfalls, the deserts, the mountain ranges and the beaches, 60,000 years of cultural heritage and our vibrant multiculturalism. Who else eats laksa for breakfast in this country? Only us. We are a unique part of the nation. It's our story and it's our future. I'd like to conclude my remarks today by saying this: ignore regional Australia, ignore the Northern Territory at your own peril. The time is now. We have in 12 months passed critical reform to get the Territory's economy moving forward. We've done more to reform the regulatory landscape, approvals processes, taxation and stimulation than the Territory has seen in a generation. We've stared down the activists by removing third-party merits reviews from the Petroleum Planning and Water Acts, and we've defunded the Environmental Defenders Office. We've backed in small business by raising the payroll tax-free threshold to 2.5 million, the best in the country, the most competitive place for payroll tax in the country. And we have sophisticated new pathways for developing significant projects and territory development areas with the Territory Coordinator. And we will reframe our regulatory environment through our risk-based model, thanks to our approvals fast-track task force. ABS data confirms a 69.7% year-on-year increase in residential building approvals, which are quadruple the national average. CommSec, State of the States, has the Territory as the fastest growing economy in the country at 10.2%, which is nearly 3 times higher than the next closest jurisdiction. And our population growth is the strongest in the nation, as well as us being the strongest performer in annual growth rates at 5.5%, again leading the nation. Next week, I will travel to Japan to reinforce our strategic and economic partnerships with INPEX, one of Australia's largest LNG producers, and meet with the Japanese government to progress the Japanese Defence Force rotation here in the Territory. Our government understands very clearly that our role is to create that can-do environment and support Territorians to achieve their dreams and aspirations for the future. We're fostering a culture of saying yes before we say no and giving political certainty for people to invest. We know that that takes standing up and having sometimes a lot of guts, and we've made some pretty gutsy decisions. But in the Northern Territory, we don't believe being part of the bush should be some sort of handicap. We believe it's a place of unrivalled wealth and a unique place that can deliver for this country. And this is just the beginning for the Territory and for us as a government. We are building momentum and driving results, and there is much more work to do. Now is the time for you to be a first mover and get excited about this frontier. There is no better way to secure Australia's future than investing in the Territory's future. Thank you.
You're going to be accused of running away again.
I did get told that 10 times. Yeah, here I am.
Chief Minister, 1 year on, it was pretty obvious there were 3 key things, and you spoke about them in your speech, so we might tick them off one by one. So reducing crime was obviously the number one priority and probably the main reason for your landslide win at the election last year. Where do you see things at 12 months down the track?
There's still a lot of work to do, Matt, but community safety is critical to everything. You can't have people enjoying living here. You can't have strong schools or shops, businesses. And so it's been a significant focus for us, and we've put through a lot of reform. And, this is a national audience, and I'm getting plenty of national attention and protest at what we're doing. But we are unapologetic about the course we're taking when it comes to law and order. And it's a very simple proposition. We as a government have decided that people's right to be safe has to be above everything else, in particular, the right of the offender. And when you have that as a very clear value proposition, it makes every other decision very easy. So with that reduction in victims at 4.7%, it's a good start. Things are way too high still, and we've been really supporting our police as much as we can with a lot of reform. We're doing a lot of work in corrections and courts. But this is just the beginning, Matt, and we make no apologies for that.
Well, to your point, 4.7% is a small number, and it's a very small sample size. I mean, when do you reassess this and determine whether you are heading in the right direction or not?
No, we absolutely, I've got no question in my mind that we are heading in the right direction. When you look at other data, for example, house break-ins, commercial break-ins, right across the Territory, we're down around that 30% mark. We've had some huge drops, robberies, theft, some of the assault categories need a lot more work. But again, we've had a decade where people haven't been held accountable, where we weren't building appropriate correctional facilities, where Labor wasn't investing in the root causes of crime. And so we've got to do all of that simultaneously to make the Territory safer, and that's not always easy. Court reform takes time. Putting the rights of kids to be safe above everything else is really important for us, and we've had a huge turnaround in kids going to school. So we're really focused on making sure that kids have every opportunity in life, that if you're doing the wrong thing now, our cops will get you. The Deputy Chief Minister will always find a bed for you if you need one in a correctional facility, because at the end of the day, we have to be safe, and if we're safe, we're thriving.
What about the longer term play though? We heard Nikita's great story in the introduction here, someone who's come out of the child protection system and is now thriving, but that can't happen unless there are proper supports put around someone or an opportunity given to them. So what are you doing to make sure that those kids who might be off the rails at 10, 11, 12 years don't just end up in a detention centre or in an adult prison, that they have a bright future as well?
That's exactly right. And you know, Nikita, it was fantastic to hear her story. And there's many young people like that. So we've done a lot in the care and protection of children space. We're really strong on family responsibility agreements, which is effectively a contract between the parent and the government around looking after your own children and what is expected when you raise a child in terms of knowing where they are and not allowing them to be off the rails and destroying other people's lives. We've had a lot of work around what we call Circuit Breaker, which is basically a program that means child protection are intervening before police if we're finding young people out on the street at night. There's been a lot more coordination across services and a lot stronger delineation around whose job is what. Under the previous government, police were left to clean up every mess. Any mess in the territory that happened, oh, that's police. Now, that's not possible. Police are there to catch bad guys. I say that all the time, Matt, and as a national audience, that might be something you don't hear often. But that is a reality. That is why they pull in a blue uniform every day. And we have other services that need to pick up and do what they've got to do as well. So it's a team effort, and that coordination, investment in programs that actually works is what we're really focused on. This is not something you can just throw money at and hope it'll get better. I'm not interested in press release after press release talking about funding programs and then there's no KPI at the end. This is about funding what works and making a real difference in people's lives, and that's what we care about.
National audience probably also aware, or maybe not aware, that today your government is introducing the personal use of pepper spray, something that's only legal in WA at the moment. I know that you have a mandate to deliver on crime, and you've made absolutely no secret about the fact that you're going to be tough on crime and crack down on law and order issues. But do you risk, even with a policy like this, sending a message to the rest of the country, I'm even thinking from a tourism perspective, that God, if you have to carry pepper spray around in the Northern Territory to be safe, that's not the kind of place that I want to go to.
And I think there's just, it's obviously created a lot of hype. And so I think there's just a lot of misinformation about it. At the end of the day, no matter where you are in this country, if you are attacked, you will defend yourself. And you will use whatever is around you to do that. You might end up having to use your hands. And there are laws in place which will step you through whether you did that in the right way or not. And nothing is different for the Territory. We have self-defence laws which currently exist, and they existed yesterday the same as today. But from today, you will be able to legally purchase pepper spray for your own self-defence, to buy you time to get away, so that you don't have to scrape and scramble for the stick or the rock to defend yourself, so that you don't have to end up in hand-to-hand combat with someone who's formed that view to hurt you. This is about buying distance and buying you time to get away. And it's not compulsory. People can make their own choice. It's much stronger regulated than it is in WA, and we're proud of those safeguards. It is a trial, and we've got robust system to review it. But at the end of the day, if you need to defend yourself, our job is to make sure you have every opportunity to be safe.
We might move on to the rebuilding the economy part of your mantra. Big announcement today with the APA Group and the Sturt pipeline. How important is it for your government, especially even from a domestic electricity supply point of view, to be getting that gas out of the Beetaloo Basin and getting it here to Darwin?
It's extremely important. I think people are so sick and tired of hearing about it. We want that gas out of the ground, and we've had a Labor government for nearly a decade who just flip-flopped and didn't provide the approval certainty or even focus on this industry. So we've been really clear, sent some very strong messages with that removal of third-party reviews, but also around approval meaning approval, and getting these approvals done for this pipeline is key, because we don't want to have a stranded resource. It's one thing to be able to firm it up as a resource that could power this nation for 200 years, but you've got to get it to market. And so with APA and Tamboran ready to build 39 kilometres of pipeline into our north-south pipeline that already exists, means that Territorians can be using this gas from, mid next year, we're hoping. And again, reinforces the message in my speech that People living in freezing cold Melbourne or Sydney or wherever you are should not be having these astronomical power price increases. You should not be making choices about feeding your kids or running the heater. We as a country are resource rich, but the policy is all wrong. And so it's time to put down, not have that fight. We've got to be developing the Beetaloo. We're really proud of it. My Deputy Chief Minister has been on a road trip around the country speaking with other ministers about the opportunities here. But it's a game changer economically and socially for us.
What about as far as jobs in remote and rural areas? Because we're talking, our national audience is probably looking at this and thinking that Darwin to them is the bush, but there's a real divide here between, I'm sure if we speak to Sid Vashis later, he won't say that, we live in the bush. He thinks we live in a big city. So as far as, and even in terms of the Beetaloo, what's the potential there to see those jobs exist in those regional areas where they can be so scarce at the moment?
100%, Matt. And we've talked about this a lot as a government. We've got people living very remote, and a lot of Aboriginal Territorians living in, hundreds of kilometres away from regional centres, and even our regional centres being, 3,000 people, very small. And so the opportunity for real jobs on country and jobs in our regions is huge. And I know Alex from Beetaloo Energy will be on later, and he can tell you that, they're employing Aboriginal people out there in the Beetaloo right now doing testing and other things. So this is real. This is not talk. And that's why we're so focused on it, because the opportunity is here right now. It's not a future, let's talk about it. It's a let's get this done. It is there, it is ready, and now we've got to turn it into the benefit that we know it can be. And the growth in terms of infrastructure, supply chains, all of those other things that are going to come from the development of the Beetaloo are huge. And you know what? They're all in the regions, and that's why I said ignore it at your peril. The regions literally have everything this country needs to survive and be strong. So why aren't we as a country on a unity ticket to develop it?
Well, just on that issue as well, we saw in the videos that were played earlier that come from other parts of the country where they're talking about the state of their roads and the state of some of their infrastructure. But, we're in a situation right now where one of our biggest communities is about to be cut off completely. I'm talking of Wadair, of course, because there's not going to be a barge service there anymore, and there's not a road where you can get there for 12 months of the year. What are you doing about fixing that infrastructure deficit and getting the federal government to fix that in partnership with you?
Yeah, it's really challenging for us. The expectation of what the Territory can deliver is unrealistic, and it's been unrealistic since the very first day of self-government. That deal was never properly delivered, and I think people don't appreciate how challenging it is to be a Territory, not a state, and the flow-on impact of that. You even look at something like the state of our Stewart Highway. We have one major arterial road up and down. We've obviously got the Victoria Highway out to WA and then the Barkly out to Queensland. And those are regularly underwater every year from floods, cutting off food and services to Darwin, let alone when you talk about remote communities like Wadair. So from our perspective, the EOI went out for Wadair Barge today, and we're looking forward to that being resolved before the wet season. But more broadly, if the Northern Territory is expected to stump up 70% of sealed roads, it's never going to happen. And so we need the Commonwealth. We need the Commonwealth government to be looking really realistically at developing the Territory so that we are ready to deliver for this nation. And that's the conversation we're now having.
I want to move on finally to the lifestyle piece. And you've spoken quite a few times about population growth from the ComSec report. I'm sure that you're happy to see some encouraging data there, but really for a long time our population has been struggling, and there are some barriers for people who want to come to live here and raise a family here and stay here. And we're seeing one in particular at the moment with the issue at the Darwin Private Hospital and the cancellation of maternity services there. What's the government doing to ensure that, one, we return maternity services to people who live in Darwin? This is a city of 150,000 people, and also to make sure that those private hospital services remain.
Yeah, and this is why you need a strong economy. When you go from delivering 900 babies a year in a private service to less than 300, the service pulls out. And it's not just maternity. There's a range of other things that we don't have critical mass in anymore because our economy has been going backwards. And as a result, the choice disappears. And when choice disappears, so do the people. because they look to somewhere else to live. And so that's why our focus on growing the economy has been so strong, because it literally impacts every other facet of life and lifestyle, which is critical to being able to stay here. What I will say is that, you know, Singapore's a really hot place too. So I don't, you know, and people go to Bali all the time. I don't really know what the difference is. We have some sort of hot stigma. And Paul, I loved earlier in your introduction saying that it's a nice start to spring. It's certainly a nice start to the build-up, and not many people enjoy experiencing that. But, you know, it is a great place. Like, where else in the world would you want to raise your kids? You know, I had the most iconic Territory upbringing. You're outside all the time. You're in the fresh air. You're out swimming in waterfalls on the weekend. You might be hunting with your dad or fishing in the harbour. All of these activities are just good, wholesome Australian family values. And it's unbelievable. It's really a precious thing we have. And so our focus is on preserving and enhancing that. We've just purchased 30,000 hectares of a place called Silkwood, which is right next to one of our huge national parks. And it's incredible. It has hot springs, four-wheel driving, camping, you name it. So we're doubling down. We're really locking it in for the future, because we believe in this place and we believe in it now for people here, and we believe in it for our kids.
Just to your point, I mean, do we sell that well enough? Because I got a message from my boss last night. She's down at the Trailer Boat Club going, oh my God, I can't believe this place is amazing. I can't believe you live here. I've just come from Ballarat where it was 7 degrees. You know, are we doing a good enough job of selling this and the image of this place? I read a story in the Daily Mail last week, for instance, that said that Darwin was the worst place on earth and that no one should ever want to come here. Yes. Is our reputation nationally, you know, not in line with the place that we know and love?
I think anyone who's come here and had a perception about the place leaves completely changed. Completely changed. There is something about the Territory, it gets under your skin. And once it's there, it never leaves you. And it's an inquisitive thing that makes you want to go back. It's our beautiful sunsets. It's our pristine beaches. It's that relaxed environment. It's the fact that you can achieve anything you want to set out to. You know, our housing prices relative to the rest of this country are good, and we've got the country's best home build scheme. We will give you $50,000 for your first home to build a home here. We'll give you $30,000 if you've already built one before and hey, you just want to have another one. We are absolutely backing in people to come to the Territory, and my challenge to people watching would be just do it. Just come. And if you leave thinking you had a bad time, fine. But I bet you won't.
There we go. What a great note to finish on. Thanks, Leah Finocchiaro, the Chief Minister.
Thank you.
Absolutely hit it out of the park. Thank you so much to the Chief Minister and to Matt, who's a rock star in his own right. Now, we were expecting that at this moment our keynote address would be coming from Mrs. Gina Reinhardt, the Executive Chairman of Hancock Prospecting. Sadly, she is sorely disappointed not to be able to be joining us today. She's attending to an urgent matter. But in her place, she has sent just a young up-and-comer, a young bloke who's got a big future in front of him. He started at work experience just 2 years ago, and upon that he's been able to build an incredible career as the Chief Executive Officer of Hancock Agriculture and S. Kidman & Co. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the man who I love the most in the Northern Territory, none other than Mr. Adam Giles.
Thanks very much, Paul. To Leah and your colleagues, congratulations. I mean, you're doing a tremendous job of getting the Territory back on track. That speech, the Q&A, it is outstanding to hear how the Territory is moving forward. So to you, your government, all those that work in government, congratulations. The place needs fixing and you're doing a bloody good job. Jacinta, good to see you. Luke, I'm not sure where you are, Luke. It'd be good to recognise Luke in the room and all the other dignitaries. Now, Mrs. Reinhardt gives her apologies for not being here today, and she's asked me to read her speech, so I'll do that on her behalf. Good morning. Please listen to the farmers and pastoralists. If they can't afford to grow food here, we'll be relying on imports from countries that care about their own people trying to earn a living, not about emissions or environmental standards. As clearly explained in the videos we did for the Bush Summit this year, including with the farmers, the Daubneys, of the multi-award winning Bannister Downs Dairy in southern Western Australia, Net zero is making farming in Australia more difficult, more expensive, and increasingly so as the net zero demands and government paperwork burdens increase. And what does this mean? It means higher food and higher wine prices for everybody, plus higher prices for those who use farm produce like cotton or wool or leather or cow manure. Net zero doesn't just hurt farmers, it hits our nation's dinner plates. And the non-synthetic clothes you wear, bed linen, soft furnitures, etc., leather products. I say this quickly, but let's think of the many things that we use leather alone for. Horse bridles, saddles, chairs, couches, shoes, boots, sandals, in case anyone wants to walk. Anyone like music? Musical instruments, not only drums, even bagpipes, Bible covers, motorbike and bike seats, wallets, purses, handbags, work clothing, tool belts, protective gear. Are we still wanting any of these safety matters these days? For those who like pets, dog and cat collars, leads and even Australian footballs and cricket mitts and other great Australian sports and many other things that you and I use on an everyday basis. We shouldn't forget that net zero won't just hurt farmers and those in the bush, but it will hurt all of us. Our farmers are among the most efficient and environmentally responsible in the world. They are more than just food providers, they're an important part of our history and an important part of our DNA. High proportions of those from the bush enlist for Australia when conflicts arise. Aren't they fantastic Australians? I'm from generations of farmers and pastoralists. I know them, they are hurting and they are rightly upset. I listen to them, I respect them and I love them. Yet they are being punished with higher power, fuel and fertiliser costs, loss of productive land, even in areas, loss of rights to their land, stress and increasingly government administration burdens, all because of net zero policies. You can't keep hitting the farmers expecting their resilience because they are leaving their farms. This means solid country people are thin on the ground for bushfires and other emergencies, and the farmers are now saying no more. Do we want food security and higher living standards, or the Paris Accord and all of those consequences? Small businesses are the backbone of Australia, but we can't escape the truth that net zero is breaking them. Politicians talk about green jobs, but why? Why are they closing their minds to record business failures, meaning job losses, and the reality that net zero destroys real jobs in the industries that keep our country's economy alive? Vast fields of solar panels or towering wind turbines and transmission lines are essentially build and run projects. They create a short burst of jobs during their unnecessarily environmental destructive construction. But once the ribbon is cut and the photo opportunities are done, they generate very few long-term jobs. Perhaps some people are employed to bury the birds and the bats that the wind towers will be killing. Let's hear the reality from countries leading the change to wrongly called renewables and the so-called much-needed green economic vision. In Germany, industry has been complaining about higher domestic energy costs for years, and with even several trade unions joining the concern by warning of the serious consequences of rising energy costs in the country, saying hundreds of thousands of jobs are at risk due to the high electricity prices that exceed international standards. In a recent open letter from leading German unionists to the Chancellor, they said, "We are in the most severe economic crisis since World War II. June last year, at least 100,000 industrial jobs were eliminated altogether. The political promises of the previous federal government for a green economic miracle have amounted to nothing but smoke and mirrors. In reality, never before have so many well-paid jobs been under threat as what they are today. If the energy transition is, as some say, an operation on the heart of our economy, then so far this operation has failed miserably. We must admit the patient is in danger of dying on the operating table. For 35 years, solar and wind power have been legally privileged and subsidised, but to this day they contribute no more to supply security than they did 3 decades ago. Instead, they generate hundreds of billions of costs for the grid. The unions stress that energy-intensive sectors such as steelmaking, chemicals and building materials, all central to the German economy, are vulnerable and struggling. Market prices for fuel and electricity have adjusted accordingly, triggering double-digit energy inflation. Soaring energy prices combined with runaway inflation have severely curtailed European livelihoods. Net zero doesn't mean more jobs and opportunities, it means less. We can't afford to keep letting net zero help kill the very businesses that employs millions of Australians and provide billions of dollars of revenue to our governments. Record business failures and lower investment in Australia does not mean great management, nor does $1 trillion or more of government debt with massive wasteful interest bills, rising government employees and government tape and regulations, and rising expense of all this, not contributing to revenue nor productivity. Nor does increasing crime, so our families are less and less safe, and inadequate defence, what is meant to be government's most important duty to keep our country safe. Yes, we do have the best miners in Australia, but as the Minerals Council of Australia says, 80% of projects in the pipeline are now on the casualty list. What does all this mean? This means that we are a nation in crisis. And we have to stop thinking, it's okay, it's only the Aussie farmers that are being hit by net zero. Well, in the last few days, the largest iron ore and mining companies have reported their biannual dividends, the lowest in 7 or 8 years. So how many mums and dads are hurt by this? Yes, the excuse is anticipated iron ore price reduction, while some of the majors invest billions bringing on stream more iron ore mines overseas. But why don't the media report they are also spending billions and billions of dollars of shareholder money on that great green incinerator? A gigantic incinerator that does nothing to add extra production, nothing to add improved productivity. Frankly, for many reasons, brings on lower productivity and zilch for improved competitiveness. If you'd like to, please refer to my last 2 Bush Summit addresses with 3 of our knowledgeable CEOs. Mum and Dad shareholders, please demand answers to just how many billions of shareholders' money you could otherwise enjoy as dividends, are these big companies spending on the great green incinerator, buying new expensive electric vehicles and putting in charging stations, plus paying for wrongly called renewables, storage batteries and transmission lines, modifying equipment and studies into all sorts of green things, including hydrogen. And call for all of those mining executives living and enjoying luxury green gabfest at Davos and other places to pay that money back, and to pay that money back personally. If you don't stand up at shareholder meetings and elsewhere, that great green incinerator will keep going. So don't look forward to dividends you deserve, and don't forget about the investment in your superannuation funds either. As net zero burdens increase, worse is yet to come. It's easy for city politicians to talk propaganda, but what have they actually done to listen and truly help struggling businesses, particularly those in agriculture? Where is the state that has dropped payroll tax, licence fees and stamp duty tax, taxes that were meant to be dropped 2 decades ago when the GST first came in? We have a great divide. A divide that is largely not between city and country, but between country and governments. We've held the Bush Summit, so let's make it mean something to those who live in the bush, and small businesses too. Let's now call for, until successfully actioned, the dropping of these old state taxes. And not only on small businesses, as bigger businesses pass on these government costs to smaller businesses and those in the bush. Australians were promised cheaper power from the so-called renewables, but instead we've ended up with the highest prices in the world and massive government spending of taxpayers' money and companies' spending of their shareholders' money. Bush Summit should call for these figures to be made publicly available. And we will have increasingly intermittent electricity, given that the sun doesn't shine overnight, or when lessened by clouds and volcanoes too, and the wind doesn't always blow at the speed required. Intermittent high-cost energy doesn't mean Australia can have a great future with many industries, including AI, that require reliable electricity. How is that going to help our declining productivity or our chance to try to lower some costs and be able to compete internationally? Families, pensioners and others on low incomes are being forced to choose between heating, food and medicines, while politicians and bureaucrats disgracefully ignore the cruelty to millions of Aussies, from pensioners to veterans to students and the disabled, not letting them work for more than a few cappuccinos a week. We hear governments say their duty is to represent or look after all Australians. If that's what they truly mean, we need to hear now that they will let all of those people work if they wish. Let them work to ease the government-caused cost of living increase, and while working, add to the national revenue by paying taxes on their earnings. Again, let's see some results from this Bush Summit. Let's see these socialist burdensome restrictions that both parties have enforced lifted. And let's see our government do further action to look after all Australians and do something that would actually decrease living expenses, removing its huge expense of excise tax on fuel. This would help not only those who drive cars, but all producers who require fuel, hence the goods they sell, all transport of goods and services, in short, would help all Australians. Bush Summit, let's act on this till the government delivers. We're in record debt. We just can't keep asking for more and more spending, even on worthwhile things, which much of this Bush Summit has focused on, especially when we are attacking the very industries where the revenue needed to provide comes from. Let's not forget, governments can't give us anything they don't take from us first. A very wasteful circle, and one that is mortgaging the next generation's future. And just offering farmers to be saddled with more debt, more interest to pay on government loans is not a key win. Another benefit, if we let Australians work, we then won't need the massive increase in immigration in Australia, which is causing huge problems with our inadequate infrastructure for such massive increases, from hospitals to housing to roads to car parks, to increased costs and crime without sufficient increases in police budgets. Net zero was sold as a dream, even to give us lower energy prices, but the reality, it's a nightmare that Australians cannot afford. Albeit not for some enjoying the taxpayer-funded green energy trough and luxury gab fests at taxpayer and shareholder expense. If our country is as energy rich as it is, why aren't we using more of our coal and gas that were proven to give us cheap and reliable energy for decades and decades? Net zero, and wrongly called renewables, are driving us into energy inadequacy and energy insecurity. While we profit mainly overseas businesses to supply toxic solar panels with wind towers and batteries, and build additional electricity lines upsetting farmers and their farms, and destroying large parts of our environment. We even hear that this has benefits for farmers. Well, why leave the benefits just to the farmers for these wind towers and transmission lines? Let's share the benefits with those city electorates on the East Coast, so they can appreciate the destruction, the stress and expense along our city beach lines, and the swimmers and surfers could swim and surf around the wind towers and transmission lines and enjoy the changed view. And city folk can pay for the endless replacement and storage of these toxic mineral-glugging renewables, not at some distant time either. Energy is the foundation of energy. Farming, mining, the two industries that not only support many other businesses, but also provide the most revenue to government for the expenditure government does, from its prime responsibility of defence, people that should be keeping Australians safe, to infrastructure, to hospitals, the elderly and much more. Plus energy is the foundation for everything that Plus energy is the foundation for everything that manufacturing, transport, hospitals, ambulances, hotels, restaurants, offices, and even household living requires. We, an energy-rich nation, are closing down or delaying coal and gas right here while China is building a new coal-fired power plant almost every week. Not using our resources does not reduce global emissions. Exporting them just shifts emissions overseas while leaving us weaker, poorer, unsecure and dependent. It's madness to cripple ourselves and lower our living standards while other nations keep growing. Every time a factory or business shuts here or a mine is delayed because of high energy costs and government burdens, others open up overseas. Hence, our saving of emissions is not us doing our part, as the emissions simply transfers to other countries. Net zero is already lessening our industries, sending jobs offshore and leaving Australians behind. But don't forget, if this policy or this cult continues, it will get worse, much, much worse. Earlier speeches and panels throughout the Bush Summit have given examples of the massive investment and costs of net zero requirement increases. Green investment that does not add to our production capacity, productivity or competitiveness. Net zero, higher cost intermittent, unreliable energy doesn't just hurt our industries, business and economy. It hurts our living standards, it hurts the forgotten ones, our pensioners, our veterans, our students and their future, our disabled and all of those on lower incomes. It hurts people, even noisy green activists, relying on emergency services, our hospitals and our fire brigades, the hospitals too. It hurts national security. If we can't produce steel or fertiliser or refine oil for the fuel we need or produce electricity reliably, we'll be increasingly forced to rely on imports. That makes us vulnerable and that makes us dependent and does nothing to keep our living standards high or growing. What can you do? Get onto your online comments in the media. Get your letters to the editors and to the politicians and support those who stand up and fight back. Let's make the Bush Summit genuinely successful and let more people support the end to the Paris Accord that Australians cannot afford and the end to net zero. Let's also call for special economic zones across our north with astonishingly less government tape and updated tax rebates for all that live above the 26th parallel. Why strategic economic zones? As thousands have been helping countries successfully around the world, but not in Australia. Let's get back to living within our means and never forgetting all we call for from government must firstly be provided by us, the taxpayers. Why am I bothering to stand up and say it's time for truth, when those benefiting from taxpayers and shareholders' money, plus the unthinking ones, often this means the far left, will do all they can to tear me down? It's because I'm truly concerned about the dangerous road that our country is on, and the millions of Australians who will suffer if the 34.5% mandate continues to lead us down the net zero, intermittent, unreliable, high-cost electricity road to ruin. A road other countries have already shown is one we should have the sense to avoid. What we need is intestinal fortitude to fix this, not a huge, expensive green slush trough, wasting taxpayers' money that does nothing to add to productivity or competitiveness. It's time for the truth on net zero. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam, and please pass on our best to Mrs Reinhardt for her support throughout all of the Bush Summit right around the country. It is now time for us to welcome our first panel of the day. This is to focus on Darwin as a regional powerhouse. Could you please welcome Immins Kins, who is the co-chair of Australians for Northern Development and Economic Vision, Romy Carey, who is the CEO of the Northern Territory Cattlemen's Association, Tanya Constable, who is the CEO of the Minerals Council of Australia. Please come on stage, guys, it's all good. And the Honourable Robin Cahill, who is, or Carl I should say, OAM, who is the Minister for Trade, Business and Asian Relations, International Education, Migration and Population, Workforce Development, Advanced Manufacturing, Children and Families, Child Protection and the Prevention of Domestic Violence. To moderate this discussion, please welcome back the Editor of the NT News, Melanie Plain.
All right, into our first panel. I'd just like to quickly note, thank you, Minister, for sticking around for this panel. I understand the rest of your ministers had to head off to a cabinet meeting. So yeah, really appreciate you staying on with us. First things first, following off from that great speech we just had then, Romy, the cattle sector contributes more than 450 million directly to the NT economy and indirectly contributes in excess of $1 billion. Northern Territory pastoralists have over 4.5 billion invested in the NT, making it one of the most valuable long-term economic pillars of the Territory's economy. What are some of the challenges and I guess opportunities that graziers and the cattle industry is facing?
Yeah, thank you. And it's been an interesting morning to listen, and I think a lot of them have been raised already. I think importantly, access and equality. So a lot of what we've talked about broadly is the regional road network. It's access to primary healthcare. It's access to quality education for our children. What we do when we produce food and fibre for the nation can't be achieved if we don't have equity and access to all of these things that those of us who live in urban areas come to rely on. So I think for us, importantly and broadly tying in with the theme of the Bush Summit, it's that equity piece.
And what could the government at both a federal level and a territorial level be doing to support the industry better?
Yeah, I really liked Leah's comments this morning. The bipartisan work needs to be done. We need to put politics aside. We need to look at what the big issues are. You mentioned this morning that 70% of our road network is not sealed. Now, I make representation as the Northern Territory Cattlemen's Association CEO to all levels of government and anyone who sits still for too long. So that is a huge piece for us. We need a federal government that gets in and sits at the table with the Territory government and says, what can we do to get these roads sealed? Just last week, we've got several roads are in a state of disrepair at the moment, and we've got roads where freight won't travel. They won't provide those essential goods that we need to produce our food and fibre, and that's just not good enough for those that live in the regions, whether they're producers, whether they're mining companies, whether they live on remote communities. So that bipartisan approach, we need to sit down and get the job done.
And you might have read a story in today's paper from a truck driver who carts a lot of the goods across the Territory, and he spoke about, say, he's carting watermelons that are huge for the ag industry. It's taken a lot of time to produce, so we can't really do 130 on the bumpy Barclay to get them to Queensland, otherwise they're going to be smashed by the time they get there. I guess that's just one example. Are there any other, real examples that you can give of how people are struggling with the road?
Yeah, I think if you can do 130 down the Barclay in a 300 series, you're doing well. Our road trains carting cattle are down to 20 kilometres, 10 kilometres. We're taking whole days to drive really short distances. Like the reality of getting in and out of where we are is a nightmare, and we've got these large parcels of the Territory that we can't access because our roads are just not good enough. And we've got road tolls and taxes we've got to pay through our vehicle registration, and your car has to be roadworthy to get on our roads, but our roads are certainly not, worthy enough for our cars and our vehicles to travel on safely and to get our product to market.
Absolutely. I know, Tanya, we spoke about this. This is an issue that's also facing the mineral sector. Obviously, the Tatamai gold mine down there, they've just had a road sealing program that's been really successful. But obviously, getting that work done will also allow us to access other sites too. What's the take from you?
Mel, there's that huge opportunity. I'm not sure if there's a slide that's come up on infrastructure. Is that up?
Yeah,
great. So I think that this morning the Chief Minister talked about all those great opportunities in the Northern Territory. The Northern Territory is the gateway to Southeast Asia, and I know that the Minister will talk about Southeast Asia, I'm sure. So I'll just focus on what should be done in the Northern Territory. So if I think about the integration of that infrastructure in the Northern Territory, the linking of defence, manufacturing, mining and agriculture, there are huge opportunities as long as we see that infrastructure put into place. Now, the federal government and the Northern Territory government have been working really closely, and we've seen funding put into to the Northern Territory. There's been about $1 billion that has now been put in on the Tanami Road, which is a 1,000-kilometre road, and 700 kilometres of that is unsealed. So getting that going is really important if we want to really realise the $370 billion worth of mining in the region. So we need the gas industry, so that's fantastic on the Beetaloo, but the mining industry is paying the bills in the Northern Territory. It's over $4 billion. So that aspect linked with rail, road, rail, right through to the port of Darwin and the other ports are really important for the Territory. So that link and public and private partnerships are a real opportunity for us in the Northern Territory. So we want to see that happen really quickly, and also, I think the Tennant Creek, prospects of Tennant Creek, particularly around air and airport, is phenomenally important. Yep.
Absolutely, and that's something that we brought up in the federal election campaign, trying to get that upgraded Tennant Creek strip out there, and obviously the on-user facilities to really unlock the potential of that area. Minister Carl, what's I guess your thoughts on extending that strip out there, and is the government in negotiations with the feds on this?
I think absolutely one of the critical things for the Northern Territory is our capacity for connectivity, not just between our major cities and the rest of Australia, but the rest of the world, particularly Southeast Asia. And if we're looking at the development in the Barkly region specifically, we absolutely have to have that Tennant Creek Airport upgraded. There are discussions underway, and we are pushing very hard to see that we can actually have that airport and the air routes that go with it consistently there. And I think for all of regional Australia, one of the biggest challenges is that the federal government really isn't focusing in that space. And the reality is that for Australia to be successful, regional and remote Australia must be connected to our major cities, and there is an absolute role to play by the federal government in that space.
Absolutely, and outside of air, I guess, just jumping back to the roads there too, obviously it's vital for our ag industry and our mining industry, but also for the people that are living in remote communities that are being cut off by flooding and that aren't able to have, I guess, the prosperous future that we living in the city probably take for granted a little bit. What work's being done, and I know the Chief Minister mentioned that the feds have to come to the table on this one too, around that space, sealing roads to some of our remote communities.
Absolutely. It really does defy logic that you can have 1.4 million hectares of land space where the federal government has dropped the ball and doesn't seem to think that the connectivity in our road space to our remote regions is important enough to be able to make that investment. I know that the Treasurer, Minister Yan, is working very closely with his counterparts in federal government, selling the story about why it's so important for us to have these roads sealed and reliable 365 days a year. You cannot have a community that's facing being cut off on a regular basis and not knowing whether they're going to be able to get their food supplies or their fuel supplies to be able to keep things going. So here in Australia, we were built on the back of our regional areas, and I think somewhere along the way that has been dropped, and we really need to refocus on that, and we need to make sure that that infrastructure comes with it.
Absolutely. Jumping to you, Amance, NDEV prides itself on representing individuals and businesses that care about Northern Australia and its people and development. It says government imposes onerous red tape and regulation that really hinders that. What are some of the opportunities you can see for developing the North and also the Northern Territory specifically?
Well, I think in terms of the relationship that the Northern Territory has with the federal government, the days of incrementalism need to end, and the introduction of a special economic zone across the whole of the Northern Territory, I think, is required to crystallise all the many opportunities that have been raised here today. And I was particularly impressed with the Chief Minister's speech, and also your speech, that there are many opportunities here. And if we look at what's happening in the rest of the world, 75% of all countries have special economic zones. They have differentiated tax systems, much lower taxes than us. They have very streamlined regulation systems, and they have one-stop shops where an investor can come. And we have a federation. We have the feds, we have the state governments, and we have territories and local governments as well. So I suppose it's 4. In those special economic zones around the world, there's just one spot where an investor can go and the approvals can be fast-tracked. That's something that's kind of normal. 75% of countries around the world have these. 88% of the world's population live in countries with special economic zones, and Australia has 0. Now, ANDEV, in terms of its developing Northern Australia, we want to see the whole of the Northern Territory become a special economic zone. And the federal government has no constitutional impediments for introducing differentiated taxation, regulation, and one-stop shops here in the Northern Territory. And the many opportunities, particularly talking about the gas, we're talking about rare earths and a whole range of other minerals, and the LNG projects, they all generate the growth. They generate the growth that generates the taxation. And that's something really important that people really need to appreciate. There's this kind of sense that the economy is a magic pudding. You put your hand up and the feds or whoever is going to create the solution. The thing that comes out of these special economic zones, and if you look at China, back in 1980 they introduced 4 special economic zones. Shenzhen was a fishing village. The population might have been just a few thousand. Now it's probably in the top 10 countries in the world in terms of its economic growth. It generates, I think it's $468 billion worth of trade. That's happened over 45 years. They had a vision. They looked into the future. They saw the opportunities, the underexploited resources, and they had a vision. They introduced these special economic zones. Why can't we do it? Let's do it in the Northern Territory first.
Definitely. I think that does cause for applause. Minister, do you and the CLP back this vision, and is that something that you're looking to implement?
Absolutely. It's the logical approach, and there has been discussions in this field. So for the Northern Territory to realise its potential, a special economic zone would absolutely facilitate that, particularly when we're looking at the investment opportunity. And the reality is the Northern Territory does have the answer to pretty much most of Australia's problems. So the fact that we've got people sitting in Victoria facing rolling brownouts and blackouts in the very near future because they don't have enough gas or energy to fuel their electricity is insane, because we have it right here. And that knowledge isn't well known in the eastern states. So my colleagues and I have been selling that message very loudly and very clearly, because if we can get that going, everything else will follow. Cheap energy is the answer to pretty much anything that we need to do. It will open up the territory enormously, and having a special economic zone here is absolutely the way to go.
Brilliant. Tanya, the mining industry, we already know that the mining industry contributes so much to the NT economy and is doing the heavy lifting at the moment. What would a special economic zone look like for your area?
Well, I think a focus on making sure that we've got the right sort of taxation arrangements. I think there's plenty of opportunity there. We've talked about FBT and what it might mean. We've got to get housing right in the Northern Territory, and it's really great to see the Chief Minister focused on all of those promises that that she made, but I think housing is really important to get people into the Territory. We've only got 7 mines in the Northern Territory, and there is so much opportunity. If you look at Western Australia, there has a couple of hundred mines, and we've got 7 in the Territory, with a few more starting to come on very quickly. But getting some of those policy positions right at a federal level and at the NT, so making sure that they're integrated, like environmental approvals, taxation, that we've got cheap energy, and I agree with the Minister, cheap energy is the key to everything. We've got common user infrastructure, which I talked about before. Those issues, along with making sure that we're partnering on skills, that's really, really important. So that economic zone needs to bring all of those policy issues together in order to get the growth that we need. Mining pays the bills. We need to partner with agriculture, make sure that those partnerships are strong, because if we don't have the ability for industry to coexist, and there's a bit of a tussle at the moment, we've got to stop that tussle and start to partner between industry. We cannot expect that government do all the heavy lifting. We've got to get away from just the public purse doing all the heavy lifting, and business coming back and taking control of business opportunities. So working in partnership is what we want. We don't want the government to do all the heavy lifting. Public-private partnerships and business partnering is what we want to see.
Absolutely. Collaboration, we know, is key to success in the Territory, and touching on getting people here. Obviously, lifestyle's been a big part of the new NT government's, I guess, mandate in the last 12 months, and growing that workforce. Minister, I know you've done a lot of work in the tourism space trying to open up the Territory so people can come and visit, and we've had some big success there. What are you targeting next? We've got Chinese airlines flying in now. We've got direct routes to Asia there. What's next?
So we have been incredibly successful. We've got 6 new international routes that have come on board, which make the connectivity for the Northern Territory not just to the country but internationally, which means it's very attractive for people to come and live and work here, and skills exchange programs, which is part of the foundation of what we've been talking about to our Asian relations neighbours. But to be honest with you, my next focus is an internal connection, which is we really need to see Uluru connected to Alice and to Darwin, because for those of you who don't know, the only way you can actually fly to Uluru is from Melbourne or Brisbane, which is just crazy. So that's really important. Securing those connections between Darwin and Nhulunbuy and Tennant Creek, Catherine and Alice is also critical, because being able to move around within the Territory makes it far more attractive to come and live and work here. And then the flow on from that is we get some really good connectivity between the east and the west coast. So I think for people, we often talk about, oh, the Territory's a really long way away, and yes, it's hot, but it really, we have to stop doing that. When people come here, they go, oh my God, I didn't realise, it's fantastic. It wasn't as hard to get there as I thought, and it's an amazing place. And the more we actually talk up the opportunity and stop going, oh, it's really hot and the build-up is terrible, it's just another time of year. The wet season is amazing. The storms we have are incredible. This is really the place to live and to work and to invest. And it's a place where the opportunities are now. This is a place where anything is possible and everything can happen, and I think that really has to be the focus.
Absolutely, and getting more people here, the more exposed, the more people will have move here and grow our population, then enter the workforce and perhaps the ag industry and the cattle industry. Romy, what's the workforce projections looking like there? Are there gaps that need to be filled in the cattle industry, or how are we tracking?
Absolutely. This is as good an opportunity as any to do a workforce pitch, but our industry really needs all kinds. You can be the minister that holds the ag portfolio, you can be a ringer, you can be a pilot. We need highly skilled specialists, we need agronomists. So there is a really big and diverse career pathway in agriculture, and I think sometimes that's missed. We watch Territory and we think we're all cowboys riding horses and motorbikes, and there's certainly a place for that, but it's so specialised, our industry, and there's so much opportunity here, and we're always looking for people to come in. There's always a place for anybody. It doesn't matter what your background is. There's a place for you in the agriculture industry.
I'm not putting my hand up for fencing though. Someone else can
We
take
have
on
plenty
that
of other jobs, don't worry.
Tanya, similarly for you, I guess workforce projections in the minerals and the mining sector. If all these mines that we have in exploration process and in the works come online, we're going to need a lot of workers.
We are. I think we're doing very well on a skilled workforce in the Northern Territory, and we tend to, because of the high wages, we tend to attract a lot of workers. But we are partnering with TAFEs and other institutions in trying to get more skilled workers to upskill. I think the opportunities that come with technology are changing the dynamic of the workforce and making it pretty sexy industry to work in, with artificial intelligence and remote operations and those sorts of things. They present a great opportunity as well as working on the mines themselves. But we've got to get those skills for a period, I think we are going to rely on migration and getting people into Australia to help train the workforces that we need. So all of those things I talked about are essential to get people on the ground and to get people living in the Northern Territory. But I will say about 51% of our workforce lives and works in the Territory. I think that's essential to make sure that we've got strong communities, because community is what it's all about. If we don't get community right, then I think all industry falls over, and we're pretty proud of the work that we are doing on community. But skills, like everybody else, we're suffering that skills deficit. We need more mining engineers, we need more technical trades, we need more support people. Every job in the mining industry attracts 6 more in the Northern Territory, and that is huge for the Northern Territory in terms of growth and opportunity, and we want to realise that growth and opportunity.
Absolutely, and we want Territorians working in those roles, but we also need some people to come in from interstate and make a life here. And Mans, how do we do that? How do we lure them up here?
Special economic zone. The reason why this is incredibly important is because it brings investment. I'm an economist. Investment today is production, consumption, jobs tomorrow. If we don't have the investment today, we won't have the production, the jobs, the income tomorrow. It just will not happen. So the Northern Territory has the potential to lead the rest of Australia in terms of developing these special economic zones. And our business investment in Australia has fallen down to 1991 levels. Our capital base is very small here. We have net export of capital from Australia going overseas. And why is that? Because we've become uncompetitive. The investment seems to stop in Southeast Asia. And all of the Asians, America, almost every single state in America is a special economic zone. And we can't do it. We have this sort of problem about changing the tax system to generate growth in a area like the Northern Territory. Deng Xiaoping in 1980, when he introduced the 4 special economic zones, it was a pilot. And now there are almost 2,600 special economic zones across China. And they change them all the time. It starts from manufacturing. It goes into high tech. I mean, the potential here is immense. But we need that framework to allow the market, to allow the private sector to do the work, as you were saying, to create the jobs, to create the income. And and at the end of that day, what happens? There's more taxation. There's more taxation because we've generated more growth. We've had more investment. We've had more jobs. We have more taxation. The economy works like this. There's business, then there's households which are dependent on business, and then you have government, which is dependent on those first 2. And if we don't have investment in business, we're not going to have the next 2. We're just not going to have it.
Mel, can I just say something there?
Absolutely.
Just on that, in terms of the links, I think it's incredibly important that we don't see ourselves isolated as the Northern Territory or as Australia. That link with supply chains, particularly into Asia, we're really good at some things. We're really good at agriculture. We're really good at mining. We're really good at oil and gas. And there are other things. But manufacturing, who's good at that? Asia is good at that. So our links on those supply chains and getting that investment flowing in a circular way back into Australia, back into the Northern Territory is key. So those links and what the Minister and the Northern Territory government and the federal government are doing in terms of establishing those links, that is so critical to that growth, to that investment back in. So we can't do it ourselves, we must do it with others. And I think this is the time, this is the action that's needed and the action that is occurring right now.
Yeah, but we've got to be competitive. Otherwise that flow's not going to work.
Which is where we get back to
We've got to be
economic zone
Yeah,
and making
absolutely.
it as easy as possible to do business here. And we've reached out to Asia. We've had an investment summit here, which was incredibly well attended, 13 countries, and we're already seeing those connections happening. And so that's why it's critical that the federal government gets on board and the other states and territories, we all work together, because this is how Australia is going to move forward at a time when we've probably been going backwards.
Absolutely. Beautiful. Well, 25 minutes goes pretty fast when you're talking about special economic zones and the ag industry. But thank you all for joining me today, and that's the end of our first panel. Thank you.
Thank you. When Australia thinks of mining, they often picture big machines and vast sites. But what they're really seeing is regional Australia, because that's where our story begins. From the red earth of the Pilbara to the coalfields of the Bowen Basin, from Broken Hill to Roxby Downs, mining is at the heart of more than 110 regional and remote communities. Our industry supports over 1.25 million jobs, directly and indirectly. That's about 1 in every 11 jobs in Australia, and the vast majority of them are in the bush. In many towns, mining is the biggest employer. We help fund schools and hospitals, partner with traditional owners, support small businesses, and back the local footy club. And we deliver what Australia and the world needs. In 2023-24, our resources exports were worth $405 billion. That includes iron ore, coal, gold, copper and lithium, the essential ingredients for building cities, keeping the lights on and powering the clean energy transition. These are the materials that drive our economy today and underpin the industries of tomorrow. And that's why the Minerals Council of Australia is proud to partner with the Bush Summit, because the future of this country is being shaped in the regions. From gold in Ballarat and rare earths in Wagga Wagga to coal and critical minerals near Toowoomba, nickel exploration around Mount Gambier, port and supply chain operations in Broome, and strategic minerals and energy in Darwin, the summit is meeting where mining matters. As Australia moves towards a cleaner, stronger, more secure economy, it's regional mining communities that will lead the way. The bush matters, the regions matter, and we'll keep standing with them every step of the way.
My oath. Now, in a moment, we're about to be joined by a particularly special person in Senator Jacinta Nampijinpa Price. She's going to talk about productivity and protections, the two imperatives for the Northern Territory and the nation. But before I introduce her, anyone who has seen the Senator in action knows the powerhouse that she is. In the experience that I've had of talking to her, broadcasting with her, celebrating many life achievements, including, of course, becoming a grandparent quite recently, there's quite a connection that the Senator has built with thousands of people that have never met her but count her as a significant part of their diet of how the country works and should work. And I certainly know extended members of my family have always felt like that. If Mum's watching, she's a huge favourite. But she is a proud Territorian, a proud ambassador for the possibilities of this area, a person who fights for you from the heart of the country to the halls of power. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce to you to deliver the keynote today, to Senator Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price.
Now that I'm a grandmother, I have to wear glasses to read. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an absolute pleasure to be here today. At the outset, I want to commend Gina Reinhardt and, of course, Adam Giles. The national sweep of bush summits wouldn't be possible without the support of Hancock Prospecting and S. Kidman. My thanks also to News Corp Australia, the Northern Territory News and Sky News for your coverage of issues affecting regional Australians and, of course, Territorians. I also acknowledge all of these distinguished speakers, especially Chief Minister Leah Finocchiaro, who's doing a sterling job of leading the Northern Territory. So you'd have to be living under a rock to recognise two significant challenges facing Australia. One is productivity, the other is, of course, protecting our nation. So I'll touch on both issues today, especially with regard to the Northern Territory. 11 days ago, the Treasurer's Economic Reform Roundtable wrapped up. It was a talkfest that produced very few solutions for our nation's economic woes. With predetermined outcomes and hand-picked attendees, well, what else did we expect? The Albanese government simply wants obedient head nods, not, of course, new ideas like we're hearing today. As the Jobs and Skills Summit of 2022, as with that, the Treasurer's Roundtable used the veneer of consultation to greenlight Labor's agenda, an agenda of more government and union control across our economy. Consider for a moment what we've seen during the more than 3 years that the Albanese government has been in power. We've seen record government spending. Our economy will soon be burdened with $1 trillion of debt for the very first time. A burden our children and our grandchildren will, of course, have to bear. We've seen an appetite for government intrusion into the lives of Australians. Federal Labor has enacted some 5,000 new regulations during its time in office. And we've seen interference across the economy. Interference through a renewables-only energy policy that's making your power bills skyrocket and forcing you to live in the way the government wants you to, not the way you need to live. Interference through environmental and cultural heritage policies that stop economic ventures from getting off the ground and would, of course, benefit communities. Interference through IR policies that enable power-hungry union bosses to tell employers how to run their businesses. And interference through industry policies where Labor sidelines known market winners and instead picks its own winners while propping them up with subsidies. In so many ways, the heavy hand of Canberra hovers over Australian families, small businesses and manufacturers. Alarmingly, Labor is moving Australia away from a free market economy and towards a state-directed, controlled economy. Labor has embraced the same statist ideas that have devastated economies and people wherever and whenever they've been implemented. Shadow Finance Minister, my colleague James Patterson, made an important point about national productivity. In the 80s and 90s, productivity was growing at about 3% per year. In the early 2000s, it was growing about 2% per year. In the 2010s, it was growing around 1% per year. But the Reserve Bank recently downgraded productivity to just 0.7%. As Senator Patterson says, productivity growth is now at a crisis level. Labor's big government, big spending, big taxation and big interference agenda is a handbrake on productivity. We need real solutions to re-energise the economy. We need to do what Ronald Reagan did and unleash the magic of the marketplace. So let me posit one suggestion, which is crucial. Crucial for the Territory's economic development, crucial for addressing Indigenous disadvantage, and crucial for boosting our national productivity and prosperity. I've made this suggestion before. It's the long overdue review of the Aboriginal Land Rights Act. The Act came into effect in 1976. Its intent was to give traditional Indigenous owners not only greater ownership of their land, but control over their land too. To this end, land councils were established to hold lands in trust and preside over the use of those lands through leases, licences and agreements. Half a century on, the reality is that Indigenous Australians in the Northern Territory are land rich and dirt poor and amongst our most marginalised within the nation. Today, some 50% of the Northern Territory is owned by Indigenous Australians, but it's incredibly difficult for them to use this land for economic purposes. The land councils are not functioning as they were intended. There's administrative bottlenecks and excessively long processing times for leases, and that inhibits private property ownership and the commercialisation of land. But there also can be very paternalistic as well, which is a mindset where the preservation of culture and tradition on those lands holds back economic development. David Tollner, former member of Solomon, summed up the situation more than a decade ago. He said that the Aboriginal Land Rights Act doesn't concern itself with how the new landowners are going to make a buck. Quite the opposite. It's about protection of land as a right, the preservation of culture, locking the gate, defending Aboriginal people and their land from the intrusion of outsiders, whether miners, pastoralists, tourists, anyone without a permit, even their own future government. As I've said before, there's a racism of low expectations when it comes to Indigenous Australians and Indigenous Territorians. For Indigenous Australians to be masters of their own fate, captains of their souls, we must do away with notions of victimhood that are woven into outdated legislation. It's beyond time that the Aboriginal Land Rights Act was reviewed and modernised. If it can be done, we will have more Indigenous empowerment, more economic prosperity for the Northern Territory, and more productivity when we need it the most. Now let me turn from Australia's productivity challenge to the challenge of protecting Australia. Just as I spoke candidly about the voice, which would have divided our nation, and we're seeing some of the remnants of that now, I'll also speak candidly about the defence of our nation. Many Australians don't appreciate the great danger of our age, and why would they? All too often, the Albanese government talks about strategic competition or disruption to global's rules-based order. But such vague bureaucratic speak stops our nation discussing what we must. We must have a frank and national debate on the danger posed by the Chinese Communist Party's military aggression in our region and its foreign interference within our country. It's confounding that a recent news poll found that more Australians are worried about President Trump's tariffs than the Chinese Communist Party's military aggression. In other words, they're more worried about the sanctions of a long-standing democratic ally than an authoritarian regime. Since the second decade of this century, the Chinese Communist Party has been defined by key features: by its military build-up at speed and scale, not for self-defence, but to exert power; by its willingness to flex its military muscle to intimidate; and by its disrespect for the sovereignty of other nations. There's now a litany of examples of the Chinese Communist Party causing tensions across our region with its military adventurism, coercion, and aggression. Indeed, when its navy tested weapons off our east coast, that wasn't a benign exercise, that was a rehearsal. And there can be no doubt that the Chinese Communist Party wants to see China become the dominant power within the region. Were that to transpire, the character of the region would change drastically. An expectation of subservience to the Chinese Communist Party would erode the sovereignty of nations. Naturally, we want China to be a successful nation and its people to prosper. That's beneficial for them and the world. But what must be deterred is the Chinese Communist Party's desire to dominate our region and to define destinies of free countries. In my capacity as Shadow Minister in the Defence Portfolio, I'll do what the government is not. And that's helping to awaken our nation to a great danger of our age, to stir us into action to help preserve peace in the region and to deter aggression. In the event of conflict in our region, here's two things that would happen. One, global weapons supply chains will be even more stretched. That makes sovereign weapons production a national imperative, not a choice. And two, key civilian and military infrastructure could be targeted. For example, RAAF bases Darwin and Tyndall, HMAS Coonawarra and Pine Gap south of Alice Springs. The Chinese Communist Party's warships circumnavigated our continent. They project naval power into the region. Their missiles can strike Australia. Once our country was largely protected by the tyranny of distance, now new weapons have turned safe distance into perilous proximity. But long-range weapons work both ways. That's why this territory is so critical to the defence of our nation and, of course, deterring adversaries. In modern militaries, there's still a requirement for major platforms like submarines, frigates, tanks and aircraft. But as the wars in Ukraine and the Middle East have revealed, these exquisite platforms are increasingly vulnerable to small, simple and smart weapons that can be produced quickly and cheaply in bulk. Precision missiles and munitions, as well as drones, unmanned vehicles and vessels, aren't a fad. They've changed the character of warfare. What we urgently need is a sovereign defence industry that can produce these consumables of conflict at speed and scale. Small and medium-sized businesses are mission critical in this regard, including right here in the Northern Territory. And with technology changing the battlefield in unprecedented ways, there's work to be done by small and medium-sized businesses in the broader economy that has the potential for military application. This is especially the case in terms of AI, cyber, drones and counter-drone technologies, autonomous machines for land and sea, rockets, satellites and more besides. Noting the geographic importance of the Northern Territory, we also need to harden our bases and critical civilian infrastructure. Doing all these things requires, of course, the Albanese government to start taking defence seriously. First, it needs to increase defence spending at least to 3% of GDP as a matter of urgency. Second, it needs to put serious money behind our small and medium-sized businesses who can contribute to defence. And by association, accepting a higher degree of risk. Yes, of course, some ventures will fail and others will succeed, but our nation will be better defended from putting faith into what Australians can do. And third, the government needs to start being a lifter and stop being a leaner when it comes to our alliance with the US. If this government truly believes in a free, open and stable Indo-Pacific, then it must quickly come to realise which major power stands for those goals and which major power stands against those goals. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Senator. Now we move to our second panel of the day. This one is going to discuss major projects and infrastructure. Please welcome to the stage Adam Giles, who is of course the Chief Executive Officer of Hancock Agriculture and S. Kidman and Co. He'll be joined by Sean Fleming, who is the Executive General Manager of Gas Transmission and Storage for APA, Alex Underwood, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Beetaloo Energy, and Peter Dummett, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Darwin Port. Moderating is our friend Matt Cunningham, Sky News Northern Australia correspondent and the best bloke we've got in the business.
Thanks for the introduction, Paul. Sean, I might start with you since you have the big news out today. Tell us about these pipeline plans.
Yes, exciting news this morning, and thank you to the Chief Minister and the Deputy for the announcement. The Sturt Plateau Pipeline, the SPP, it's the first pipeline that we're going to develop out of the southern Beetaloo Basin. So very important in terms of developing the Beetaloo Basin that we connect the basin to markets. So it's a 37-kilometre pipeline, buried pipeline, to connect the Tamboran Resources operated Shenandoah South pilot project we've heard so much about, and some really successful drilling results that have been reported over the last few months, equally as good as Alex's in Beetaloo Energy. But to bring those resources to the existing Amadeus gas pipeline. Now that's the artery, the pipeline between Alice Springs and Darwin, to bring that gas to market. And thanks to the NT government, they've been great to deal with, and we've got that permit to construct now. But they've also supported the project with the gas sales agreement. Now, the gas sales agreement with both Tamboran and with Beetaloo Energy, that sales agreement breathed life, breathed confidence, and allowed companies like APA to start to invest in these projects.
Alex, I might ask you, we spoke about this at the NT News Futures only a week ago with Tamboran. There's been a lot of discussion about the potential for Beetaloo. There's a lot of hype around it. It feels like we've been waiting for a very long time. How close is it to this becoming reality?
Yeah, so as the Chief Minister was saying before, this is the largest gas resource onshore Australia, and what we've seen in the United States is that shale gas really transformed their economy. They've got the cheapest energy in the world, and it wasn't renewables that's driving down emissions intensity in the US, but actually gas that's doing a lot of the heavy lifting there. And so, you know, we and other companies have really looked to replicate that incredible economic bounty here in Australia. As you said, it's been a long time coming. I think we had the independent scientific inquiry between 2016 and 2018, and that did, cause some delays in the development of the basin, but it set a very clear regulatory framework that is designed to both protect the environment, but also ensure that the interests of all stakeholders are adequately addressed. And after a lot of hard work by government, industry, landholders, and a whole range of stakeholders, we are finally now at the point where we're going to start seeing gas being delivered from the basin. So obviously the work of Tamboran and APA Group in the Shenandoah project is going to be critical to that, with gas production coming in the middle of next year. And our timeline is very similar. We've received the consent of traditional owners to sell our appraisal gas. That's gone through the Northern Land Council process, and so now we can start building the gas plant very soon and delivering gas from our wells into the local market.
So you have the tick-off from the NLC now as well?
We do, yeah. We're just going through the final execution phases of that. And, you know, I must say that working with traditional owners is absolutely critical. Our project is on Aboriginal land. The traditional owners literally own the surface rights to the land. And we've been working with them for a very, very long time, way back to 2011. And that process has reached a successful conclusion.
We heard Nicole talk in her opening today about not just being about consulting stakeholders, but about it being an economic partnership with Aboriginal people. What are the benefits that a project like yours can bring to Aboriginal people living in that area?
Yeah, Nicole's comments this morning really resonated with me. So we have been working in genuine partnership with traditional owners since 2011, not only because we are required to, but because it's the right thing to do. You know, I've lost count of the number of times I've been to Aboriginal communities such as Borroloola, and you know, a lot of these remote Indigenous communities are really lacking in genuine economic opportunities, and you know, projects like ours, they do create that real opportunity for traditional owners, not just to receive royalties as generating an economic rent from their land, but also critically jobs. So we've got a number of traditional owners working with us right now, some of whom I think you met on a recent site visit. And, you know, that didn't just start overnight. That's required years and years of really genuine consultation, particularly in the face of some pretty misleading information that has been fed to traditional owners from outside influences. And I think the consent process that we've just gone through really speaks to that genuine partnership. We've made commitments to the traditional owners, not just around royalties, but also around jobs and skills, and it's something we're very proud of.
Well, I think one of the TOs I was speaking to when I was out at your site was saying that she was in Canberra protesting when you know, she first heard about your plans, and now she's there working for you on site. I mean, how have you managed to turn around that relationship, and what have been some of the barriers you've faced along the way there?
Yeah, so as I said, there are activist groups who have gone and spread fundamental misinformation about our activities to traditional owners. But the way you get around that is you've got to be fair dinkum with people. You've got to get into their communities, treat them with respect, and also expect that respect to be reciprocated. And then you've got to do what you say you're going to do. So we are very careful that we don't overpromise to people about where we're at in this phase of our project. So we're always under-promising and over-delivering. But also, you know, through the consultation processes we've done, you know, the traditional owners of the area that we are in are some of the most sophisticated people in terms of understanding the risks and mitigants around our project, the extraordinary lengths we go to protect cultural heritage, and that work is done by the traditional owners themselves, which is only appropriate. But then as the project has started moving into a more permanent phase of actually having work year round, that allows us to employ people to work on site for us, and there's no better way to learn than on the job, right? So people from the local communities are working on site, they're asking questions of our technical experts, and that really helps them build the confidence that we are doing things the right way.
Adam, there's been a lot spoken about Beetaloo gas, and it's been spoken about for a long time. When you were in power here, when you were the Chief Minister, you delivered the Northern Gas Pipeline. Why did you see that as so important at that time?
Well, fundamentally, any government needs to keep its citizens safe, as Leah said, but it's also got to deliver services such as hospital and health and education, but they've got to also build an economy. And looking at the Northern Territory and Northern Australia, identifying what those economic enablers are and thinking big picture is really important. I spent a lot of time working with then Premier Palaszczuk in Queensland and Mike Baird in New South Wales and others, and identified the supply curve, the downward supply curve for them with gas and energy sources in those states, and we worked closely with them to come to an agreement looking at Beetaloo as the saviour for some of the East Coast gas supplies, because we knew back then in 2019 New South Wales was going to start to have a downturn in gas. So we knew that there was an opportunity. We had the scientific expertise on the resource of the Beetaloo, and we knew that gas, which back then was wrongly called a transitionary fuel, it's now called a baseload fuel. We knew that that was going to be necessary for the future of Australia for energy to keep electricity prices and manufacturing going. But also it was the base case as an opportunity to develop the Northern Territory. And if you have a look at some of the key drivers in the macro sense in the Territory economy, mining is a part, but as Tanya at the MCA will tell you, there hasn't been a lot of major mines started in the Northern Territory pretty much since, as Jacinta alluded to, the Land Rights Act. And we know, and I've said this many times before, minerals don't stop at the Western Australian Queensland border. They're in the Northern Territory. We've got to look at ways we're developing those resources and build a base case of what can drive our economy rather than have the handout approach of asking the federal government for money all the time. It's just finishing on a point, Matt. As being the major sponsor of the Bush Summit, I've had the opportunity to go to summits in Townsville, Cairns, Broome, Mount Gambier, Toowoomba, Wagga, Ballarat, and now here. And there's three that really stand out to me as being different, and one being Wagga Wagga and the other being Townsville, which was more of a lead-up event. Those places, and I'll get to Darwin, those places were more embracing about how to build jobs and attract investment and build the economy, where some of the other locations were, how do we spend? So it was, we're putting this much money into spending by government, that much money into spending. And I was sitting here, I was just listening as we're talking, and I was got to say, I was bloody impressed with what Leah said, because it's about building the Northern Territory, it's not about spending. And that's a completely different paradigm. So going back to your question about Beetaloo, it's about opening up, it's about building jobs, it's about bringing investment, and it's not just about pumping gas through an APA pipeline, which is fantastic news. It's about what you can do with that gas as well, because there's many downstream opportunities that haven't been discussed.
Well, on that point, Sean, I mean, a great announcement today, but there is going to be the need, you would think, for more than just the Sturt Plateau pipeline. What are APA's plans for more infrastructure out of the Beetaloo to get that gas to other places, including to the East Coast?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. No, you're exactly right. So the Sturt Plateau pipeline is just the first of many that we plan to, first of many pipelines that we plan to come out of the Beetaloo Basin. It's a good proof of concept. I don't know if many people know, but the Northern Territory is heavily reliant on gas-fired electricity generation. I think it's around 88% of the capacity here is gas. So that project alone, the SPP coupled with Tamboran Resources, that's around 60% of that 88%, which can lead to gas-fired generation. So that's a reliable energy source, and that's an affordable energy source. So it's a good start. But you're right, there's vision. There's vision to move the Beetaloo Basin production north at LNG scale. There's vision to move the Beetaloo production to the East Coast gas grid, both to service the domestic and LNG industries on the east. The NT government themselves are doing a great job at leading that effort to the north. So the NT Energy Link project, which is LNG scale pipelines and other utilities to the north. So we're working alongside that process with the NT government, with others. We really see that the opportunity is in the east as well. So there is a looming shortfall on the East Coast gas grid, the East Coast domestic market. Depending on who you are, some forecast that as early as the end of this decade, some into the early 2030s. There's a lot of existing infrastructure between the Beetaloo and the East Coast. We talked about the Northern Gas Pipeline as well. That infrastructure exists, so the economic best move is to incrementally expand in that infrastructure to start bringing material volumes over to the East Coast in time. Now, we have plans that could see us bring 100 to 200 terajoules per day, and in gas speak, think of the eastern domestic gas market as being around 500 terajoules on a normal gas day. So you think 1 to 200 terajoules being brought into that market, that's a material impact on that forecast shortfall.
Remarkable too when you think, as we've heard today, that gas import terminals are being built in some of these southern states. Alex, the Australian energy producers just a couple of weeks ago said they would support a domestic gas reservation policy. Obviously, the thought around that is that we use our own gas here rather than have to import it from overseas, which seems an absurd proposition when you consider the resource that we have readily available here. What are your thoughts on that issue and what rules should be placed around that gas?
Yeah, so first of all, we are a proudly Australian company, but also a proudly Northern Territorian company. And so, you know, as our actions are demonstrating, we believe that the first gas that comes from our project, which belongs to the people of the Northern Territory, needs to be delivered into the local NT market. Then we need to be getting more gas into Australia's east coast. I think one of the lived experience of the federal system we have is that states and territories can actually withhold development of their own gas resources, often for political purposes, and it's just wrong that we've got gas shortages in this country. We've got some of the biggest gas endowments in the world, and yet we've got shortages on Australia's east coast. I think developing gas import terminals is a horrible idea on a number of fronts. It actually exposes you to global LNG prices, which is not a good thing. And so, you know, if we're going to have states like Victoria and New South Wales that are not adequately developing their own gas resources, then the heavy lifting is being left to states like Queensland and South Australia, and now the Northern Territory has this incredible opportunity to support Australia's East Coast market. But it's also going to require more infrastructure development. The development of the Northern Gas Pipeline under Adams' government was a fantastic starting point. But given the scale of the basin, you know, that it's actually a relatively small pipeline in the scheme of things. APA is developing plans for much bigger pipelines to provide further connectivity into Australia's east coast. And it's my view that, you know, while the private sector will be able to build these pipelines, one of the market failures that we tend to have in the pipeline market, where you've got small populations spread across vast distances, is that the pipelines tend to be sized for the demand and supply of the day. And it's our strong view that we need to be finding mechanisms, such as through the Northern Australian Infrastructure Facility, to oversize pipelines so that we can really future-proof them.
Peter, we're talking about gas infrastructure and pipeline infrastructure here, but obviously port infrastructure is important as well, and the Darwin port plays a critical role getting a lot of the stuff that we dig up here out of the Northern Territory and out of the country. Can you tell us about where you guys are at? Can you fill us in a bit perhaps about the infrastructure investment you've made over the past 10 years? And then talk about, I know you've got a master plan in place, talk about what the future looks like for the Darwin port.
Yeah, sure, Matt. And look, great news, the story this morning on the NT News. I expected when I read that I'd be dropped from this panel, but great to be here.
I got to you eventually.
Look, we've done a lot of work out there in the last 10 years. I've been at the port 14 years, so 4 years before privatisation and 10 years since. Been the CEO for the last 3 years. Yeah, it's about people, it's about the infrastructure. The team's grown from 68 when I took over 3 years ago. We've just ticked over 103 staff. And we've got a lot of capacity out at the port. And we talk about resources mining being very important to the Northern Territory economy. I've been around long enough to know that when the resource sector's going well, the territory's going well. You look at our dry bulk exports last year, we're using less than 10% of our export capacity through the port. So a lot of existing capacity there. Having said that, I always say that we're the barometer for what's happening outside the port gate. Our trade is up 25% year on year over the last 12 months. So that's a bit of an indication of things are heading, and that's a combination of imports and exports as well. So whilst we sit there and say we've got a lot of capacity, we do get choke points from time to time around projects. Projects are not the justification for significant infrastructure investments, because projects go away. What we want to do is be able to build that economy, so we've got continuously improving curve, and that's around the resource sector in my view, and that's not only mining, it's obviously the Beetaloo project and others. So we've done a lot of work looking into the future. You mentioned the master plan. We've just provided the government with our port development plan, 25 to 30. The master plan looks a little bit further ahead. That's about 30 years in advance, and that's been put together over about 2 years on the back of consultation with industry. And it's looking at 3 different levels. It's what I call the blue sky dreaming, the base case and the optimistic case. And we've done some modelling on all of those and what we might need. Quite challenging with the type of port we are because we're a multi-industry, multi-commodity port. So we've got a balance for a lot of industry sectors. So master plan will be out in the next week or so. It's my view, I've got to say it because I've got a good team that's put it together. It's a pretty good look ahead at what we might need to do into the future.
What's the blue sky dreaming look like?
That's about every unicorn in the top paddock coming down and being exported. It's the stuff that is never going to get a business case together. But you've got to look at it because that might happen.
It's a facility that's been in the headlines a lot this year, certainly during the federal election. How does that affect your day-to-day operations? And are you hearing any more about the future of the lease and whether Lambridge is going to continue or not?
Look, as I said at the Future NT, I'm but a simple port manager. I focus on the day-to-day. It's about keeping the port running, regardless of what might or might not happen in the future. The port needs to operate. My focus, once again, has been making sure the staff are comfortable. I've got 103 staff, as I said, so therefore I've got 103 families that are reliant on the port to continue to operate. They're comfortable. They know full well that if anything were to change, and I don't know because I'm not involved in those discussions, I keep saying that, about 10, 15 times a week when I'm asked. It's about making sure that we've got the stability there, keep operating, dealing with our stakeholders and keeping the products moving.
It'd be remiss of me as a journalist not to ask the bloke sitting next to me about the same issue, given you were the man in charge when it happened, Adam. It was in the headlines during the federal election at every turn. In hindsight, what do you think about that decision?
It's a fantastic decision. I'd do it again. The Darwin port, since I've been out of politics, I've never spoken about Darwin port, but Cabinet made a decision on a number of reasons. The Darwin port had been operating for 17 years, never made money. As a government, we just had to keep spending taxpayers' money putting into the port. Port was sinking, had one crane, the crane destabilised and could have killed 4 maritime workers on the port. It was kept having environmental spills, chemicals and so forth into the waterways. And as what I would say about myself as a lead proponent of developing Northern Australia, where I wanted to see the Northern Territory, Northern Australia grow and prosper, Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities grow produce, grow product and need to get to a port. Port needed investment. It needed more hard stand. Going back to my old talking points, Matt. It needed more hard stand. It needed refrigerated container points, backup generators. It needed hundreds of millions of dollars spent at the port. And with a government that was in massive debt and populations where community safety wasn't as effective as it should have been, needed more investment, and health and education needed more money, and we needed to support Indigenous Australians, particularly around education, I had to make a choice on behalf of Cabinet about, do we put hundreds of millions of dollars into a port that was losing money, or do I put it into schools and hospitals and police? And we made a decision to do that. So at the time, we did an international search to try and find someone who could give us good connectivity to key trading partners around the world, around Asia. I personally went to PSA, the Port of Singapore Authority. We communicated with Rotterdam Port, the biggest port in the world. Went to Hong Kong and talked to ports in Hong Kong. We went to market, and we needed to find a partner that was going to commit to get us to market, best market, and was going to commit to putting hundreds of millions of dollars into the port. And the $500 million that we got, the $500 million dollars we got as lease money up front helped us pay back debt and lower interest rates. So was it did we make the decision on the right reasons? Yes. Am I happy with the decision? Yes. Would I do it again? I would 100% do it again. I'm a believer in Northern Australia, and we've heard from comments from speakers and panellists already today. You need critical infrastructure to be able to get your product to market. And that's what the port has done in the last 10 years with those millions of dollars. And I think that's what we need if we want to build Northern Australia. And that Robin was talking about airlines. Yes, you need airlines, and you need roads, and you need bridges, and you need ports. We've got a partner there to do it, and I think if I would have done something differently at the time, I would have probably spoken more to interstate media, because a lot of people interstate didn't know what was going on. Where in the NT, we had a joint parliamentary inquiry with Labor and the CLP. The recommendations were made. We adhered to all those recommendations. We followed everything, and we talked openly in the NT, but we didn't listen to some media commentators on talkback radio in Sydney and Melbourne. So that was part of the communication challenge. But would I do it again? Absolutely. Do I think government should take it back? No way. Why should the Australian government go and take a couple of $1 billion of taxpayers' money and try and buy it back? I think it's just madness.
You don't have a national security concern, a defence concern, considering it's owned by...
Mate, I went for a walk along the Esplanade yesterday, and I stood at one of those little lookouts there and saw a couple of boats sitting at Larrakia Naval Base. When I'm in Sydney, I see the naval ships in Sydney Harbour. Mate, this whole idea about you can see what's going on with the Navy in Australia is madness. You can track it on your mobile phone. We've got 450 metres of concrete on the side of a river. It's almost just like a big boat ramp, with all respect. Just unloading, no one's going to pick up and take concrete in the back of their truck. It's not moving anywhere. The port is owned by the NT government. It's governed by NT and federal legislation. Nothing's going to change. What we need to do, if we talk about defending our nation, and I listen intently to what Jacinta had to say, we need to defend our nation to all countries. We need to invest more in the defence of our nation. And as a garrison city such as Darwin is, we should be putting more money into defence into the Northern Territory, Northern Australia, to help defend Australia against anybody, not just one particular country. And I think this continual focus on China is not the right approach that we should be making as a nation. I think we need to be increasing our defence budget and working to support those in defence, and being prepared to defend ourselves against anybody, not just one particular country.
Well, on that point, can you please thank our panel?
Thank you. Thanks, mate.
My name is Stephen Rue, and I am the CEO of Optus. When we opened our doors to the public in 1992, we had one clear ambition: to give Australians real choice in a telecommunications provider. Since 2019, the Bush Summit has amplified rural voices and brought important conversations about the challenges and opportunities facing regional Australia to the forefront of our nation's political agenda. But more than that, it has created genuine change in the bush. Optus is proud to again be partnering with the Bush Summit, because we believe that reliable connectivity should not depend on your postcode. To support this, we are investing around $1.4 billion every year into our network and our IT systems. Our landmark mobile network sharing agreement with TPG Telecom is another important step. It gives regional Australians more choice and enables faster deployment of 5G to nearly 2,500 regional sites over the next 5 years. We also know that small businesses are the lifeblood of many regional towns. This expanded coverage helps secure their digital future. Australians rely on our network more than ever during emergencies, floods, bushfires, and severe weather. That is why we are upgrading over 1,150 regional sites to be more resilient to natural disasters. We have delivered over 300 mobile sites in regional and remote Australia in partnership with the Commonwealth and state governments. This year, we switched on one of these sites in the First Nations community of Yarrabah in far north Queensland. But it's more than just infrastructure. We are deepening our ties with local communities, whether that is by providing essential connectivity to regional community events like the Gympie Music Muster, or local heroes in Ballarat and Cairns, or helping Australians in need through our Donate Your Data programme. And because safe connectivity is just as important as reliable connectivity, we are helping young Australians build digital skills for life. Through our digital thumbprint program, we have reached nearly 670,000 students with free workshops on cyberbullying, scams, and now even AI. This is the kind of work we are proud to do, because real choice in telco means more than just competitive pricing. It means trust. It means showing up. It means being a provider people believe in.
Now to discuss the opportunities that come with sport here at the Bush Summit. With the Oceania Cup kicking off here in Darwin later in the week, the first time international hockey that has been held in the NT for now 8 years. Please welcome Kookaburra number 403, double Olympian Jeremy Hayward, who'll be sitting down with Melanie Payne for a conversation.
Yeah. Well, Jeremy, thanks for joining us here in Darwin today. You know, the town that you grew up in and playing for Waratah there. Just want to start off, there's some pretty exciting news out this morning that you are co-captaining the Australian team in the lead up to the World Cup. How do you feel about that? And I think that probably deserves a round of applause.
Yeah, that is exciting news. I think as the group, we've done a leadership process. We're able to vote and select some values that we want and what we see our future going, where we see our future going. And it was a pretty vigorous process. You sort of vote for your guys, and I was extremely proud to be selected by my peers. And I'm one of three, so we're in the infancy stages of our leadership growth, but I'm sure we're excited to go towards the future.
Absolutely, and you've got a pretty big week ahead of you with 3 games out at Marara against the Black Sticks from New Zealand. First time we've had international hockey here in 8 years. How good is the Australia squad looking? You guys going to win them all for us?
We're going to try. I think we're a young, exciting group. Recently, after the Olympic cycle, you sort of get some people that finish, and now coming in with Mark Hager, the new coach, we've got some youthful guys. They're energetic, they're exciting, they're skillful. So we're going to be sharp. We're going to be ready to go against this fierce, determined Black Stick side. Beautiful.
I grew up in Rockhampton, so I know the hometown pride of having, you know, great hockey players in Mark Knowles and Jamie Dwyer. How special is it for you to have that, to be able to play international grade in front of your home crowd and get that groundswell of support?
Yeah, the home crowd for me is the main thing. This is my origin, my people, my home. So to come back here and represent Australia, which in turn was my dream, where it all started. So it's sort of a full circle moment for me, and I can proudly run out, hopefully with the band on my arm, and representing all the people in Darwin, the hockey community, and it's going to be a special moment, something I'll cherish forever.
Beautiful. And we know hockey's a pretty big sport here in the Territory. Hockey NT has around 1,400 playing members. And we might not have the facilities totally to support that as it's growing. Normally you'd have about 1 turf per 500 people, and we have 2.5 turfs, which creates access issues. There's some speculation about potentially a new facility out at Palmerston to support the growth of the sport. What do you think about that, and how to, I guess, be seeing that facility built in Palmerston?
I would certainly agree with that. Having facilities available for Darwin and the wider region would create growth. Something that I'd love to see, more people playing hockey and having that access to the hockey pitches would just be outstanding, really.
Yeah. And how big, I guess, was for you? I mean, we know sport makes such a difference in the lives of regional Australians, and especially, you know, youth as they come up the ranks and into adulthood. How big of an impact did it have on shaping your life going forward?
Sport in general, I think I was lucky enough to grow up in the regional town here, obviously. I was able to play a wide range of sports and meet many people. And that helped me in my progression in hockey. And yeah, the regional access is you find there's lots of caring and passionate people in sport, also in hockey. So it's vital sort of for growth for hockey, but in sport in general as well.
Absolutely, and you were one of the last Australian players from the NT to go through the NTIS program, which was a high-performance program, doesn't exist anymore. How important was the support of that program in shaping your playing career, and I guess what's the alternative? Is there?
They were extremely important in my growth in my trajectory for hockey. Able to have access to high-level coaches, the facilities there, the gym, the recovery. Which now I understand that players don't get access to. So this pathway for juniors is now really difficult. Being able to be, well, for hockey, but for sport, you have to almost pack up and leave the territory in a way to progress your career. And that's not something people want to do. It's quite difficult, it's ugly, it's tough, it's something that's can be a deterrent on sport.
Yeah, we know how much you care about the NT community and the hockey community in general in the NT. Always going out of your way to give back, and especially when it comes to the NT Stingers. I know you've got some special permissions to come and play for them in years gone by. The Stingers have been playing in the Malaysia League this year after being denied a spot in Hockey 1. We're still obviously advocating for us to get a spot in that. Do you back that? And yeah.
Yeah, 100% I back that. Having that elite level team at Hockey 1, which is the elite level for hockey, in the national team, a national franchise, we don't have that pathway, we don't have the access for our kids to be, to see or to reach. So having the Stingers back up and running and for hockey, it's a great thing. So it's an ongoing battle, it's not yet finished. I'm sure there's many talks with NT Hockey and Hockey Australia. It's something to look for in the future, and I'll support the NT Hockey there and trying to get the Stingers back up and running, yeah.
Absolutely, and we know the NT is always, kind of the underdog in the state competitions, and when you come from the NT, you're always fighting harder than anyone else on the field. Do you think this in turn produces stronger players, and is that maybe why we've got some of the higher rate per capita of Olympians produced here?
Yeah, it could be one of the reasons. We punch well and truly above our weight in hockey development, so keeping that access to our players is crucial. There's some fantastic players gone before me. Brooke, Leon, my brother, Mark Hickman, Des and Joel, I can't forget. So these players, we're a hockey factory here, so we need to keep producing those sort of people, and the interest from NT Hockey to produce those people is crucial.
And just touching on Leon, he plays for the Black Sticks, right? Is he playing this week?
Yeah, Mum is a New Zealand citizen, and she made sure that she signed us both up before I can even talk, so I didn't have the chance to rebut. But Leon exercised his right to go that way. He's not playing in the New Zealand team here now, but he's helping the Stingers as an assistant coach. So he's definitely got interest in the Northern Territory Stingers and hockey here in the community as well.
Absolutely. So no awkward family dinners in your future this week on either side of the field.
Mum will be proudly wearing green and gold, I hope.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Jeremy, for coming and having a chat with us. Last question I wanted to ask of you. If there was a hockey utopia for the Northern Territory in your mind where everything was wonderful and we had access to everything, what would that look like? What would be the first thing you'd do?
What's the definition of utopia?
I guess perfect, heaven.
Heaven.
Hockey heaven.
Hockey heaven. Just a training ground, a squad where people can come to and excel and grow as athletes, as people. Just being able to contribute to the sport, facilities. I'll name them all: ice bath, gym access, coaches, high quality balls, and everything like that. So yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much and good luck this week. I'm sure we'll all be cheering you on from the stands.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Mel. Now, for our last panel today, we're going to talk about looking at livability in the Territory. Could you please welcome Mayor Sid Vashist from the Barkly Regional Council, Denise Bowden, who is from the Chief Executive of the Yothu Yindi Foundation, and Tom Leeming, who is the Deputy Chief Executive Officer of the Department of Chief Minister and Cabinet. And moderating the conversation is Matt Cunningham from Sky News.
Well, it's great at the Bush Summit to have someone who's genuinely from the bush here, Sid, the Mayor of Barkly. It doesn't get more bush than that.
It's great to have a bushy up here, Matt. So I appreciate the opportunity. Shout out to NT News and everyone else involved. You know, Kirsten Porteous and her team are doing a brilliant job.
We're here to talk about livability. What are the key things that governments, territory and federal, need to be doing in that space to make the Barkly a place where people want to live and want to stay?
At a macro level, we've heard about the roads, the infrastructure, everything that's going on. I want to just break it down locally, you know, and Matt, if I may, how many people have heard about Beetaloo today? Can I have a raise of hand? Righto. How many people know about Mullinja, Vilyaku and Gurungu? Raise of hand, please. I'll have a couple of raise of hands.
Is that your CEO?
That's the CEO of the Barkly. Ladies and gentlemen, Barkly Regional Council is the second largest local government area in the Northern Territory. In Australia, actually, after Pilbara. And we are a majority First Nations region, with about 68% of our population being the First Nations. In Tennant Creek, my hometown, we are a majority Indigenous town as well. We have phenomenal amount of opportunities. We are, the investor interest in the Barkly is absolutely amazing. Tennant Creek in the 1930s to 1960s, especially in the 1930s and 1940s, used to produce more than half of gold in the Northern Territory. The GSP of Tennant Creek, from Tennant Creek, was 30% of the Northern Territory's economy, the gross state product. The prediction, currently in the Barkly, we're sitting at about 2% GSP. So that's under $800 million coming out of the Barkly. The future projections, and I know there's some economists in the room as well here today, in a conservative figure, we're looking at about 6%, so that's tripling the amount. In a transformational and a visionary path forward, where our leaders are driving this, we are looking at about 20 to 25%. So if you look at 20%...
We're talking about going back to the gold rush days.
Absolutely. So Barkly is returning to the economic powerhouse of Northern Territory and Australia. It's exciting times for us. But this is where I want to bring the conversation where Adam Giles mentioned about the special economic zone, Imanx mentioned about the special economic zones. When we're looking at 23-24 financial year for Northern Territory, you're looking at about a $35 billion cycle. And if we reflect on this 20% trajectory for the Barkly, that's $7 billion coming out of our land. Senator Price was spot on, pretty bang on, when we are land rich, but our people still live under poverty. And we need to change that. How do we change that? We need to introduce innovations, and that is special economic zones. We need to bring the royalties back to the region. How do we bring the royalties back to the region? This is something that we need to work actively with the Northern Territory and Australian government on. And once we have those investments coming back, flowing into our region, it's going to be game-changing for everyone involved. We've had Prime Minister Albanese visit. We facilitated him, and I think Lou Gosling is in the crowd. It was great to have him and Albanese Prime Minister land and visit Lake Nass Station. Yeah. You know, it was a great opportunity. And we've got the best stake in the Barkly. Everything is bigger and better in the Barkly. When you're talking about potential one of the biggest solar projects in Sun Cable, biggest pastoral leases in the Barkly. We had the first gold pour again in 20 years in the Barkly. We're no longer on the cusp, but this is the time for us. We need to work closely. We need to have a co-contribution model where, yes, we cannot depend on government investment and expenditure. We need to get innovative about it. We need to partner with private partnerships, mate. So we've got to build better roads.
Well, just to take it back a step, if this comes off as you're expecting and hoping it will. So if you've got Sun Cable, you've got Beetaloo, you've got all these projects around the Barkly, you're going to need thousands of workers Absolutely. Who are going to need to live somewhere. My question is, how do you deal with that from an infrastructure point of view? How do you create the housing for these people And to your point about more than 50% of your residents being Indigenous, how do you ensure that they play a significant part in participating in that real economy?
Direct partnerships with the First Nations people, whether it's in business or whether it's negotiations, need to happen, and they're already happening. We are moving in the right direction. When you talk about, as I mentioned the names earlier, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, those are the names of North Camp and South Camp in Elliott Township, and Mullinja is an outstation just north of Elliott. That is in the backyard of Beetaloo. That is in the backyard of Sun Cable, the biggest, potentially second biggest solar farm. These are the names you need to know. These are the people you need to change their lives, and this is why I'm here today. This is the opportunity that we get out of the Bush Summit. How do we build sewerage ponds in these communities that I mentioned earlier is a real issue, where people are on septic tanks, they're overflowing, you have to wait for a couple of weeks to get a sucker tank out there and just get the septic out. These are real challenges for us. But at the same time, we have phenomenal opportunities, and how do we go about it, and how do we convert those challenges into opportunity? And that opportunity is something that we need to work together. It's a whole of community approach, and like politicians use intergenerational change, and there's a lot of truth in it.
Denise, for a long time you've been talking about the infrastructure deficit in the bush that Sid is talking about right now, and the responsibility of federal governments and Northern Territory governments to address this issue, and their failure really over 40 years since self-government to do anything about this. Where do you see the major hurdles being, and what we can do to make sure that there is a road to Wadair, or there is, sewerage ponds in some of these outstations in the Barkly region, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, look, our communities are an incredible part of the Northern Territory. We're so unique in the NT. I think we don't do that well enough, talk about how amazing these people are in our very remote communities. I'm not sure if anybody's aware, but the Commonwealth Grants Commission applies a formula called horizontal fiscal equalisation, and that carves up our GST, of which 80% comes from the Commonwealth into the Northern Territory government coffers. There's no accountability as to how those funds are spent, and they're basically for Indigenous, disadvantaged, very remote. Now, I mean, I don't know about any of you guys, but the mortality rates in the Northern Territory's Indigenous communities are ongoing, and our communities live on a knife edge. The other thing the Commonwealth Grants Commission applies in terms of that formula also treats an Indigenous person based in, let's say, Wadair, the same as an Indigenous person in Parramatta. And clearly, the quality of life is very, very different for those people. So if there's anything the Commonwealth and Northern Territory governments can do, is try to get on top of this, and that accountability is really important, because it needs to be hitting those places in order to make some change. And how bizarre, at the same time, more Indigenous disadvantage, more money into the Northern Territory. I mean, this is just ridiculous. This work is what we've been doing for some time now, over a decade nearly now. Matt, you've been with us along the journey. We've remained pretty clear and consistent too with our approach.
Absolutely. And there's 2 points there, I guess. More Indigenous disadvantage, more money, but at the same time, the disparity you're talking about between Wadair versus Parramatta or Manuka or whatever it may be, a growing Indigenous population on the East Coast, meaning less money for the Northern Territory.
Yeah, that and people are now identifying as that more as an Indigenous these days too. I mean, this is a complex situation, but let's take a person in Wadair. They're not going to go around to the local library. They're not going to go and, pick up a coffee and some breakfast Monday to Friday, when it's probably going to cost a whole lot more than what somebody in Parramatta's paying. Some due consideration needs to be applied to this. I think the feds have got a real responsibility. Where the Northern Territory has suffered from lax infrastructure for many, many years, since time immemorial. So this CGC model, the formula, also doesn't allow us to get beyond or ahead. We remain in the status quo that we know this to be. So we can't fix our infrastructure. We're not going to move beyond it. We will remain the same.
So does there need to be a serious, and let's be honest, the NT government's broke. We're $15 billion in debt. Does there need to be a serious injection of federal government money that is specifically dedicated to bringing the infrastructure in those remote areas up to the standards that the rest of Australia enjoys?
Absolutely, and I think that it should be multi-billions of dollars into the Northern Territory. This infrastructure, it's been, we're only, scrambling to maintain what we've got at the moment, not to improve further or to develop beyond. Yes, absolutely, the feds need to dump a hell of a lot of money into the Northern Territory.
Tom, you wouldn't argue with that, I wouldn't have thought.
I wouldn't, and as an ex-Treasury official, I won't bore you with the details of my views on GST relativities, but I agree entirely that the GST is not there to fix infrastructure deficits. It's there to create an even playing field between states and territories on service delivery, and the Territory has a massive infrastructure deficit that it's had since before self-government, and there's only one level of government that can help us fix that.
Well, we'll get to talk to Luke Gosling in a minute, so we've got a million questions for Luke. We've only got a few minutes left, and I know that's a really heavy topic of discussion, but I want to sort of look at some of the positives as well. And Denise, can I just get you to talk a little bit about the work that Yothu Yindi's been doing, particularly in education with the Duppa School out at North East Arnhem Land, which I personally, I've been there several times, and I think it's probably the greatest success story in the Territory. But how you've managed to achieve that and the results you're getting as far as engagement of Indigenous kids at school and their attendance rates.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Duppa sits out at Gunyangara in Nhulunbuy, and we were aware that Duppa existed in the 70s, and numeracy and literacy was gold. It was just amazing. We wanted to see a return to that. Not long ago, we created an independent education model. We moved away from the public system. We moved away because we needed to get our hands on the driving wheel, basically. We wanted to fill our own curriculum. We wanted to take away this controversy surrounding bilingual when Yolngu Mata out in North East Arnhem Land is the first spoken language. So therefore a kid hitting her education door is coming with full Yolngu Mata spoken, and it's seen as deficient, or it's seen as not important, and education was. So our curriculum, we tipped it inside out and upside down, and then we took it apart and put it back together again, and we created a curriculum with the expertise of Barker College, New South Wales. So went for this partnership with a school with this high expertise in education. And we were seeing something like 36% school attendance rate to 90% in 2 years. And I mean, that is incredible. It is an incredible result in the 2 years. But, that meant that we could put our Yolngu teachers who don't necessarily have an education certificate or skill, they're at the first part of a child's education. They're in the classroom. They're using Yolngu Mata as a strength and not a weakness. And by crikey, they're there every day. I mean, we're seeing a lot of men in those classrooms too, young men coming in. Mortality rate, as I mentioned, really high in our communities. We took some of our learning into some of the ceremonies, so we really did drive it. It was sort of seen as a bit controversial when we first started it, but it's getting the results, and we just needed to be able to empower our own community. And if you don't have that strong leadership in your community, you're in trouble. So, it has been an absolute amazing success for our Yolngu leaders in North East Arnhem Land to get behind that. And that's the same methodology we apply to the Garma Festival now. The tourism, the Garma Festival is the start of our dry season events. And from there, 3,500 people, we invested in infrastructure way back when, a long time ago, and now that we can see that reward coming back to us, so that whoever's coming into the Garma Festival has an absolutely amazing experience, and we want them to go back to their southern legs and shout that from the treetops.
There's no doubt it has become a great success story. We are out of time, but thank you so much for joining us here today and sharing some of your knowledge. It's been greatly appreciated.
The partnership with the Bush Summit gives us a really great opportunity to be able to reflect and connect on our contribution to regional Australia and the role that we play. As Woolworths, we have over 178,000 team members across the country, but 50,000 of those are in regional centres where we have 500 stores. We have such an important partnership with regional Australia, and it of course starts with our 3,400 suppliers and farmers that we connect with every single day to help feed Australia. And that comes down to things like our commitment around 100% red meat, fresh milk, chicken and eggs being sourced in Australia, or our 96% commitment to fruit and vegetables also being sourced in Australia. Our partnership with regional Australia is incredibly important, but we also know over the last year through inquiries, through our voice of supplier and through our direct connections that we've got more work to do. So it's really important, our product partnership, but it's also important the infrastructure that Woolworths invests across regional Australia. And that's for things like our distribution centres, the way that we transport goods from farm to families across the country and into our city locations. But we've been really focused on uplifting that investment, which helps us be able to better service all of those local communities. We know that when regional Australia thrives, Australia thrives. It's also important to recognise the resilience of our regional communities. Time and time again, they're challenged by multiple weather events, and so the resilience that they demonstrate is just incredible, and that food security right across the country is a big part of that. We're also really proud to be a partner with Rural Aid and recognising that at times of big weather events, droughts and other challenges, we need to be there partnering with local communities. And so we're proud to have donated alongside our customers over $10 million to Rural Aid. And we're particularly excited this year to be partnering with the Bush Summit and recognising our Bush champions, who of course represent all that is great about regional Australia.
Thank you. Now, to join us for another conversation is Luke Gosling, who is an OAM, of course, he's an MP. He is a tireless advocate for the Northern Territory. He's a man who's been endorsed by his community as the member for Solomon multiple times. During his parliamentary career, he has now risen to the position of Special Envoy for Defence, for Veterans Affairs and for Northern Australia. Please welcome him in conversation now with Matt Cunningham.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Luke. How do you feel about a special economic zone for the Northern Territory?
Sounds good, doesn't it? I was just talking to the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers' staff the other day about that, actually, given that there's so much interest in it. And we have the infrastructure deficits I think everyone's mentioned today. I couldn't be here for the whole event, but before I get started, Adam, if you can pass on to Mrs. Reinhardt how thankful I think we all are that there's this focus on the bush and that you've come to Darwin. So, and thanks to the Kidmans for company for sponsoring with NT News. It's great to have a bit of a spotlight. So, but it's also important to be present. So I should be in federal parliament today, but I thought it was more important to come here and to listen to the views and of industry, certainly, who I keep in good contact with, but also to get some new ideas to take back. I mean, one idea is federal government, we need X billion dollars more.
Well, that's not a new idea, is it?
No. Well,
neither is a special economic zone, but it sounds like it's something that's under consideration, is it?
Well, I was talking to my good friend Kevin Rudd about it the other day, because you'll remember.
I do remember.
When I first ran for the seat of Solomon, that he flew in and announced that we would do something like that. So over a number of years I've revisited this issue with first Chris Bowen, who was a shadow treasurer, but these days Jim. I don't know how happy he would be about having investment drawn away from Queensland. I'm sure he's got a national perspective that sees our unique opportunity here. But it's that enabling infrastructure that I think industry have identified and that we obviously understand that we need a bit of a hand with to unlock the potential that everyone's been talking about today. So yeah, that's what I'm going to continue to prosecute as an idea. Given our special status as a territory, there is a pathway to do that as has been identified in the past.
What would it look like?
Well, there's a number of ways you could structure it. I've talked about particular incentives. Pretty proud that with the NT government we've recently delivered the best DAMA, Designated Area Migration Agreement in the country, which means there's much more occupations that we can draw skilled people in, because workforce is one of the problems that we have, but also up the quantum of skilled workers that we can bring in. Obviously, we also want to grow our own, so whether it be in health, where we've got deficits of doctors, for example. Next year, there'll be the first Charles Darwin University medical program with at least 40 positions on it, so we can start to grow more of our own health professionals, because we know that they're much more likely to stay. So there's workforce issues that we're trying to address, and I guess that's part of the reason why the NT government is drastically underspending the roads funding that the federal government's provided to them, drastically underfunding the housing funding that we've agreed to spend.
Saying they're not spending the money that you're giving them.
Well, that's true, and part of it's capacity. So having the people to go out there and build the houses, for example, and I'm working with people around modular housing, which I think is part of the solution, because we can churn out high quality housing a lot quicker if we look at a modular housing approach.
Just in that health space, and we've been talking a bit about livability today, a real crisis with what's going on with the Darwin private hospital and the cancellation there of maternity services. And I know there was a belated request to the federal government for some extra funding there. I mean, where are things at there, and what can the federal government do? Are they going to come to the party and ensure that we can improve those maternity services, if not return a private operator?
Well, HealthScope sells, which is likely at some point the new operator may consider it if there's the need for it, if there's the numbers and if it all makes sense. It's not cheap to run maternity services, and I guess that's why they got rid of it from a number of HealthScope. Got rid of it from a number of their hospitals. I'm not here to say that because I've already prosecuted the argument about acting quickly, putting a request into the federal government could have changed things, but we all know that what we need to do here in the Northern Territory is to grow our population. Once you have more people here, then it becomes much more economic to have private hospitals. Obviously, I've spent a lot of time with the women that have been paying their private health insurance and haven't got the result in terms of what they had expected. The people at RDH do the very best that they can. Before getting into politics, I worked in remote health, getting doctors and nurses from down south into our communities because we just didn't have enough people. And I think that just goes to underline the fact that why we need our own medical program, why we need to have pathways for our young people to become skilled. And that's what fee-free TAFE and more university places is all about. Investing in our own people, bringing skilled people from overseas to try and overcome this workforce deficiency we've got.
You've just won a record fourth term here in Solomon. You campaigned pretty hard on the Port of Darwin, and you made that a pretty big issue in the campaign, that a re-elected Albanese government would return the Port of Darwin to Australian hands. You heard what Adam had to say a little bit earlier. When are we going to see some movement in that space?
Well, can I just start by thanking you for pointing out the fact that it wasn't just this last term, that from the day it was done, I was critical of the decision. And it's not just because I'm a fourth generation veteran, it's not because I've spent time in our military, have an understanding of national security implications of such a decision. It's because wherever I went in Australia, people also were like, what happened there? How did that happen? So I've consistently had the same position on it. It's not a partisan position, and obviously the now federal opposition had the same policy, which was to bring the port back into Australian hands. Now, when that decision was taken, and there's no need to go over that again, except to say that there were Australian proponents at the time that were putting their hand up to take the port on. Some of those same proponents are still got their hand up to say, we'll take the port on. Now, they can't do that without Commonwealth support. And I just don't want to hear anything more about a couple of billion, because we're nowhere near that. What we want to do is provide a fair price so that the current owners of the port, they get a return on their investment. We transfer to Australian ownership, and we just crack on. No one here would doubt that bringing back now $25 billion worth of trade with China has been a good thing. It's been a very good thing, but it doesn't mean that we are any different in the way that we approach our relationship with China. They're an important trading partner, but when we disagree with them, we'll let them know.
On your point about the price, though, I mean, Lambridge sort of holds all the cards here, don't they? If you foreshadowed, yes, we're taking it back, and we want to do this commercial deal, and they're putting up, well, there's some figures that are being floated, 1.3 billion or more.
Yeah, who floated those?
Well, I don't know, but those, I mean, you're in a position, you're not in your bargaining position is not strong.
Yeah, you know what strong is? Strong is having the legislative ability to take the port back.
Which is what you'll do.
When we want to do it, right? What we want to do, though, is get to a point in time where Lambridge goes, and the Prime Minister has obviously had those conversations at the highest levels in China. They didn't have too much to say about it. They appreciate the fact that we can't go into China and just say, that strategic port
So he discussed that with President Xi when he was in China?
It was discussed at a high level and it was accepted, and we're moving on. So, where are we now? Adam mentioned that it needed a couple $100 million worth of investment. When I had a walk around with Peter recently, he pointed out $60 million of investment in 10 years. About 2 weeks later, it was 80 million in the NT News, but they're only relying on a figure from the port, right? There weren't $20 million extra. The point I'm making, even if you accept that there has been significant investment in the port, there will be more investment in the port if it's in Australian hands, because there's a lot of proponents, a lot of them come and see me and say, we want to invest in the port when it's the right time to invest in the port. A lot of people in industry say, well, we need different investments in the port to maximise efficiencies, to make us more competitive. All that can happen when we get through this current process of proponents, Australian proponents who have said we're keen. We work with them at a certain point in time. It'll be up for the Lambridge board to make a call on it. And then obviously...
If they don't agree, you will use your special powers to take it back on national security grounds.
The Prime Minister's been very clear, mate. The Darwin port's coming back in Australian hands.
And what's the time? I mean, the opposition had a 6-month timeline on that.
That was the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Okay, but I mean, how long's a piece of string? I mean, Lambridge might just drag this out forever and ever. The price probably just goes up the longer they drag it out, does it not? So at some point, do you have to say, right, here's the deadline?
At the right time, Matthew. There'll be a deal.
I look forward to it. Luke Gosling, everybody.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you, Matt. Now, please welcome a man who I know can fire up a room. No pressure on him, but please. Tony Seawood, who is the President of the Pastoralists and Graziers Association of New South Wales. Of Western Australia. Bloody hell. I was watching Oscar win last night in my defence. Please welcome Tony.
Well, I stand between lunch and you guys, so I'm not going to waste a lot of your time. I'll get straight down to it. Look, it's great to be here for the 6th in a series of bush summits. There's an incredible amount of work that goes into generating the electricity that surrounds these events. So special thanks to everybody at News Corp, Kidman, and especially Dr. Gina Reinhardt, AO, for her never-ending support of this great industry. I'm Tony Seibert, President of the Pastors and Graziers Association of WA, and I'm going to speak to you today about agriculture, where I come from. Look, this Bush Summit is about a whole range of things. I want to talk about agriculture, especially in the West. My wife, my son and I run a $25 million manufacturing industry, exporting industry in York, WA. Sounds impressive, but it's not as impressive as all that. We are world competitive. We're at world's best practice. We produce enough food to feed 10,000 people. We have a very low return on capital. But never before have I been more concerned about the future in agriculture. The cost of doing business is accelerating. Most of the plant we use, tractors, sprayers and harvesters, have doubled in price in the last decade. It's not unusual for a harvester, a sprayer or a tractor to cost over $1 million. Our inputs, such as fertiliser, chemicals and labour, are on the same trajectory. Commodity prices have failed to keep up. We sold wheat 15 years ago for $400 a tonne. Today, if I could get $360 a tonne for that wheat, I'd be doing fairly well. There are not many industries in Australia today that could say that based on the prices of 15 years ago, they're still surviving. That we survive in the state today because of a run of good seasons. If we had a serious drought, I have no idea where we would end, but we have had a run of good seasons, and that's what's holding it together. The WA sheep flock in the 1990s was 40 million, in excess of 40 million sheep. 40 million. Perhaps just over 8 today. It tells a story. Now, it's not altogether to do with the live export ban, but that broke the heart of the industry. We fought over there with dignity and grace to preserve our industry. We got annihilated by a small voting bloc in Melbourne and Sydney who have no idea of what we do or the impact of what the decision is going to be. There are empty shearing sheds, burnt out sheep yards, torn up polypipe trenches all over the state where people are just removing the infrastructure you use to run sheep. We will not go back. You can't. It's not a profitable industry, and to reinvest is not going to work. So what I say to everybody here that's involved in the beef industry, I know you supported us, thank you very much, look out, because that same group that took our sheep industry to task and basically wiped us out will be coming after LiveX if they think they can get with it. When I took this job on 11 years ago, beef prices in the Kimberley about $3 a kilo live. It's still about the same today. So the beef industry is in as much pain as we are, and with buffalo coming out of India, a very cheap producer competing in the marketplace, they have a problem as well. The Talk Fest in Canberra, what an event, as if that was ever going to make a difference. That Talk Fest should have included a powerful delegation from agriculture. And when I listen to the wisdom that's been in this room, both here, Ballarat and Wagga, this is where the future of our country lies. These are the people that can give the government the advice they need to make our industry improve and grow. So not wanting to include agriculture in that series of summits, if you like to call them, what a lost opportunity. The thing that worries me and the people I represent most of all, though, is the trend. Don't worry about how you are today. Where were you? Where are we today? Where are we going tomorrow? And it's that trend that's just driving us, into the ground. We see small business all over our country closing, and productivity is falling. We are trying to be export competitive. Costs are breathing down our neck, and across the board, all indications are there that our industry is in dire trouble. Now, our Prime Minister is talking about new age manufacturing. For heaven's sake. New age. If you can't look after old age manufacturing, who the hell's going to put the money up for new age manufacturing? It's risible. But at the same time, our Treasurer, who caused the destructive burst of inflation, and he did, they overstimulated the economy, they caused it, they have known up to it, but they caused it, is celebrating wages growth. Tell me how on earth we compete against the world on fixed prices with increasing wages costs. Now, in the long run, that's inflationary, It will just cause more wages growth, more inflation, and it puts the businesses that I operate at real threat. So the government is out of touch with reality. It's confronted with crises in health, NDIS, education, defence, housing, aged care, power generation. These are crises everywhere. And somehow or another we just keep on going, it doesn't matter, it's okay. And then we have net zero. Now we've spoken about this at length today. This is one of the most destructive things we can do to our country. The big emitters must be laughing at us. China and India in particular. We have huge reserves of coal, gas and uranium, as we discussed today. Huge reserves. The world is so envious of what we've got, and what are we doing? Throwing our future down the drain. Our energy prices are amongst the highest in the world. It's destroying our economy. How dumb are we? Here today, I believe, there are over 60 nuclear plants being constructed around the world. 60. And I'm told 28 in China. It tells a story. We've got our head in the sand like a damned ostrich. But most of all, we're being dumbed down by a very clever socialist government that wants us to believe that $1 trillion of debt is okay. It's not okay. We have deficits into the foreseeable future as far as you can see. They haven't even said it might change. They've just said as far as you can see. We are mortgaging our children's future by doing this. Governments need to sit down with people like myself and some very intelligent people in the room here today to work out what our pathway forward might look like. Now, I have said this before, but I suddenly find people don't know this. At the end of World War II, we had the 4th largest air force in the world. We were building 4-engine bombers and jet fighters, the Sabre jet that flew in Korea. We had the world at our feet. At the end of World War II, we had so much potential. And the trouble today, you can't even buy an Australian lawnmower. You know, you can, like the frog in the water being boiled alive, you don't even notice that you're heating up, but look around. We had all this stuff and it's gone. So let's get down to the really critical stuff here. We had oil refineries in every capital city in Australia. We produced 90% of the fuel we needed to burn, 90%. We now import 90% of the fuel that we use. It leaves us so vulnerable, and I'm not too sure whether the last 2 refineries you've got have a future either. We may end up importing all of it. We are down sometimes to 2 to 3 weeks of fuel in our country. That's it. It's meant to be 90 days, I believe, but when you get down to 2 or 3 weeks worth of fuel, you need those tankers to keep coming on a day-to-day basis. We have a massive fuel reserve put away in the USA. Gee whiz, that's going to be useful. Really useful. Almost all of our fertiliser is now imported, and as a young fella I used to cart fertiliser back to the farm from manufacturers in Perth on a regular basis. But today, it's all imported. So we're not only tied into the world price of fertiliser, but also availability. Now, you all drive on the roads, you all see the trucks on the roads, the magnificent job that our transport industry does. The tyres aren't even made here. The tyres come from overseas, all imported. Any disruption to sea freight, both in and out of our country, will see us very quickly grind to a halt. We're not talking about it. We're talking about all the peripheral stuff that distracts the population. We're not talking about the really nitty-gritty stuff that is very important to the continuation of our economy. Without the massive contribution of mining and ag by a tiny percentage of our workforce, Greece, here we come. Now think about it. This contribution of hundreds of billions of dollars to our economy and coal, $90 billion, that underpins our universities, our health system. Our Prime Minister stands up and says medicine will be free. It's not free. Someone's paying for it. It just means that the person using it might not be paying for it. Well, in Argentina is showing that there is a way, but as Greg Sheridan recently said, we're seeing a triumph of politics over good government. We can be great, we just need to decide we really want to do that. I'd just like to read to you a small quotation, and I'll tell you who and what went on afterwards. But this is by a fellow, he was Secretary to the Treasury a while ago. First and foremost, Australia today is in a fearful mess, economically and beyond that socially. The task of cleaning up that mess, what some time ago in another context I called repairing Australia, is increasingly urgent. Secondly, none of the major federal political parties today appears ready to face up to the magnitude of that task. To date at least, none of them has demonstrated either the policy grasp or the intestinal fortitude which will be necessary to do so. Simple, plain stuff. 1990. 1990. And we have not in any way turned the corner on that. So, look, in concluding, there's a man I regard as a real hero. He's an economist, he's an American, his name is Thomas Sowell. And he said, "No society ever thrived because it had a large and growing class of parasites living off those that produce." The Economist put out a little chart a while ago, which I put away because it was so impressive. We have twice as many public servants per head of population as America. Twice as many. And they're all out there nibbling away, making certain that all the rules, all the regulations, all the red tape that confines everything we do remains in place, and they're inventing more and more of it by the day. So if America has half as many as we've got, I can go back through that chart to other countries we compete with, and they're even lower. They're less governed, less ruled by bureaucrats than we are. So we've got a long way to go, but most of all we need our governments to recognise they've made a muck of it, to sit down and use the collective wisdom of all of the people that have spoken at these Bush summits, of the last 6 of them, and have a serious discussion about whether we want to work our way forward into the future or not. There is a great opportunity there to turn things around and make Australia great again. Not hard. We just need to do that. And Jacinda's not here now. What a magnificent politician. What a wonderful asset she is to all of us. I believe she's coming under a fair bit of pressure on a range of other issues, but I just went outside to say, don't you back off, you keep going. You are the future for all of us. So thank you for your time. Stay committed and have a safe journey on your way home. Thank you very much.
G'day, I'm Adam Giles, the CEO of Hancock Agriculture. The Hancock Prospecting Group of companies, including our 2GR Wagyu, Rossi Boots, Kidman, Dryzabone and the Kidman Hat Company, are partnering for the 3rd year in the National Bush Summit. Our companies were founded and operate in many regional remote locations right across Australia and date back as far as the 1860s in the Pilbara. We've been helping open up Australia and creating thousands of jobs and livelihoods for many Australians. And our operations continue to pay billions of dollars in taxes and royalties that go towards essential services for every Australian, including those that live in our cities. But our regions are under constant attack, not only through the lack of hospitals and services, but through constant negativity and decisions being made about our industries and our livelihoods without any due considerations. The continual encroachment on agricultural land by governments who take away food-producing country for the sake of solar farms and wind towers and transmission lines is just another indication of the country being under attack. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Considering the paperwork and the expense of new government services and policies, which will see many farms continue to be unable to survive and lessening the high quality of food available to Australians. Now, nowhere is the disconnect with regional Australia clearer than in the reckless push for net zero, the greatest self-imposed business and livelihoods destroyer in our history. In this energy resource-rich nation, we've adopted an absurd energy policy which is sacrificing our role and our revenue as a global energy producing superpower, while at the same time tearing up productive farmland for unreliable solar and wind, which requires massive, expensive transmission lines, estimated to cost the taxpayer more than $1 trillion, plus the cost of expensive batteries. Electricity prices continue to spiral as wrongly called renewables, also known as intermittents, now make up 33% of the grid. And for what? Australian emissions make up just 1.1% of the global total, so tiny that it could be a statistical rounding error. The idea that crippling our own economy could shift the global climate is just naive. It's destructive of many, many Australians. Net zero is a costly agenda and one that's hurting the bush first. It makes clear the biggest problem is not a city bush divide, it's a government bush divide. Now, there's much talk about American tariffs increasing costs and affecting trade, but tariffs are a very, very small expense problem in comparison to Australia being subject to the Paris Accord, especially when those we compete against in the international marketplace do not have the massive burdens of net zero. These massive net zero burdens have consequences for every single Australian, and we need to stand up for what is great in our country, to advocate for and seek to protect what is great about Australia. It's what sets us apart from other nations, and importantly, to stand up for those industries that provide such amazing living standards for all Australians, including mining, energy and agriculture. With a country in the bush being part of our DNA and of our culture, it's only fitting that as Hancock Agriculture we stand as partners in the 2025 Bush Summit. Our country needs a strong voice and a strong people to stand in it and stand up for it. Enjoy the 2025 Bush Summit. It's great to be a part of it. Thank you.
Good man, Adam. Thank you very much. Thank you to Mrs. Reinhardt again for her support, and Tony, excellent words as always. Now, when we get to every time when it comes to the Bush Summit, there is a communique at the end of the event. It's a series of action points and a to-do list for our leaders and ourselves to ensure that we keep advocating for change in the bush. All right, and the winner is here, where the communique I'll simply read and then we'll get final closing comments from the NT News. All right, well, the 2025 NT News Bush Summit Darwin communique includes the following text: that the NT government approval of a pipeline licence to APA from the Sturt Plateau takes place, and NLC and NT government approval of the Tamboran resources to recover the appraisal gas for sale from the Beetaloo sub-basin. In summary, the Commonwealth support for sealing of roads is necessary. Better infrastructure for industry and remote communities, a special economic zone for the Northern Territory, better infrastructure to get gas to East Coast markets, better air connectivity to help the tourism sector, more investment in workforce development and skills. In a little further detail on some of these points. Sealing of the NT roads. Commonwealth to partner with the NT government to settle at least 70% of local roads currently unsealed, making sure that freight and essential goods and people can get to industry and remote communities quickly and effectively, can do so all year round. In terms of better infrastructure, more investment in road, rail and ports to improve connectivity in the Northern Territory to access Southeast Asian supply chains, including the upgrading of Tennant Creek Airport infrastructure to improve regional connectivity and to unlock investment in resources projects. A special economic zone covering the whole of the Northern Territory. This is encouraging investment through lower taxes and one-stop shop approach to streamlining approvals for major projects. Better infrastructure to get gas to East Coast markets is unlocking the Beetaloo gas supply to East Coast markets, including more and bigger pipelines. For the better tourism connectivity, our suggestions are the better connecting of Uluru and Alice Springs to Darwin by air, better regional air connections for multiple areas including Tennant Creek and Katherine, investing in workforce development in skills, filling skill shortages in agriculture and mining through better partnerships with TAFE to upskill workers, harnessing AI and building sustainable regional communities. And last but not least, the reform of the Commonwealth Grants Commission, Commonwealth funding, which better recognises the remote infrastructure deficit and Indigenous disadvantage in the Northern Territory. Thank you to all for attending and for putting in part that together. Now, to wrap up today and to close out what's been an excellent Bush Summit, one of many around the country which have been equally successful, is Kristen Porteous, who is the General Manager of NT News.
Hello, and thank you, Paul Murray from Sky News, for hosting today's summit. To all of our speakers and everybody here in Darwin, gateway to the top end of Australia's Northern Territory, and to those who have tuned in online, another great day of debate, ideas, celebrations of our regions. To bring these campaigns to life, it takes courage and thought leadership. Thank you to our national presenting partner, S. Kidman, to our national sponsors, CommBank, Optus, Qantas, Woolworths, and our local sponsors, Northern Territory Government, Minerals Council of Australia, and APA. I would also personally like to thank our editor of the NT News, Melanie Playing, for her passion and dedication to ensuring the success of this campaign. We have received the baton from Ballarat, following an incredible journey through Broome, Mount Gambier, Toowoomba, Wagga Wagga, and now we're proud to conclude this year's Bush Summit series here in Darwin. If you'd like to join the conversation or catch up on today's highlights, download the NT News app with the QR code currently on screen. Whether you're in the room or watching the live stream, we look forward to seeing you again next year as we continue to celebrate the regions that are the backbone of Australia. For our guests here in Darwin, I'd like to invite you to join us outside for a networking lunch, including some delicious S. Kidman steak and premium pies. That's a wrap from the heartland of the Northern Territory. Thank you for making Darwin the perfect finale for this year's Bush Summit series.